Welcome back, everyone, to Lesser Known Operators. A little known fact, I am terrible at cutting intros to my own podcast, so we're going to try and do it in the episode this time. This week we have Michael Sullivan, a former Green Beret from 3rd Special Forces Group, goes by Sully, seems to have been everywhere and done everything in Special Forces, along with being the Chief of Staff for Team Red, White, and Blue. Michael Sullivan, welcome to Lesser Known Operators.
It's great to be here.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Did you see my plea on one of the Facebook pages, or were you a cold message that you got from me?
You cold messaged me. I can't remember. I think it was on LinkedIn, maybe.
Oh no, I try and stay off LinkedIn. That's the most. I feel LinkedIn's the most
Is that
fake.
danger? Is that
That's
danger?
the most fake of all the social media platforms on there.
That's
I believe.
Interesting. I just saw a thing 2 days ago where they're saying it's the most trusted social media in America.
My first
Instagram
job.
second. It's weird.
Well, nothing on Instagram is real, but
I'm with you.
My first job.
Told me. Yeah.
I saw that people would be on LinkedIn and they would have these titles from the job I worked at. And I'm like, that's not what they're doing here. And it was everybody. When I got out of the military, I was like, this is just pretending to have a more serious title than what you actually do. And I was like, I got rid of it at that point, after a day.
You're just putting your military title into civilian speak. That's what they say. So
when I went to battalion staff, you know how everybody's got S3 ops sergeant, right? Yeah. Well, smart ass Ward, I was getting out and I went, Staff Sergeant Nicholas Ward, S3, taskings NCL. And then I listed out the entire thing. 3rd Battalion, 1st Special Forces Group, 1st Special Forces Command, USASOC, United States Army, United States of America, Earth. The commander only didn't let that one stay on there for very long, but
I respect that. Both the attempt and the commander. It's good.
I thought it was funny.
It's a good balance. Yeah.
So you got your Green Beret in 2001, and you served in Special Forces for the entirety of our conflict in the Middle East. Did that kid that you used to be have any idea what he was getting himself into when he walked across that stage and got handed that Green Beret?
No, absolutely not. Because like as you mentioned, I was a pre 9/11, selection and Q course guy. However, we were picking up our books for language school. So back then, they keep changing the Q course when language school happens, when it doesn't have, so we were a post Q course language school cohort back then. You actually graduated, got your beret, and then you went to language school. So I was picking up my books and air items so we could continue to jump. When I was listening to AM radio, talk radio, when the planes started hitting buildings. So the group of guys that I went through the Q course with and the Alpha course, my small group, we like a bunch of us ran down to the but it doesn't exist anymore. There was like a furniture store on Fort Bragg right next to like the clothing sales. And so we could find a TV, and we started watching what was going on. And of course, like all young captains, we're like, this is genius. This is all like unconventional. We weren't like terrified that like planes were hitting buildings. We were like, somebody is pulling off an amazing kind of like way to attack America. And we were fascinated by it. And then one of my buddies is like, hey, I bet you these are the guys in Afghanistan. They just killed Masood like the other day. We were talking about that the other day, so, we all thought we were geniuses and had it figured out. And then we were all upset to find out that we were going to still have to go to language school, and they wouldn't just immediately ship us off to be, to go fight the war. But finished language school, got to 1st Battalion, 3rd Special Forces Group, and it was, I think, 3 weeks into being there, we were told we were leaving within the month to head to Kandahar. And unfortunately for us, 1st Battalion was charged with standing up the Afghan National Army. So I always joke, like, you can blame me for the end because I was there at the start of what, was going on with the ANA. But my first trip was right there. We were cleaning out like human feces from what was the old Kabul military training center, turning into something that we could use. And we started enlisting and building battalions for a new army. So that was pretty cool. A lot of those guys actually in the battalion we had became the cohort, became the commandos later. So I kept seeing those guys. I never went to Iraq. I was a third group Afghanistan guy, 6 trips to Afghanistan.
Whew. They didn't let you skip out on language, huh? Everybody was like, oh, they're gonna let
Yeah,
us
we
do
were
it. Get
all
out of it.
convinced. Like we're gonna be the guys. They'll get us later, once they can work it in. But we don't need to learn French to go to Afghanistan. So,
Well, you know the motto, right? Soft is not mass produced, and I'm sure the commander said that. We stick to the
Tuesday.
plan, no matter what
Yeah,
the demand is. They can draw down in other areas, but we've got to meet the standard, especially at that time. So, what
yeah,
was
it was good.
the mood on post? Because Fort Bragg's, and now it's Fort Bragg again, just a
It
different
is.
Bragg.
Yeah, just a different
Um,
brag. Private.
There's an open post. You could just walk on. So, what was
Yeah,
it like being a student at that
there
point?
was a major like Bragg Boulevard was basically a major highway that went into Spring Lake that went through Post. Like anybody could drive on Post. It was open. Yeah, it was a nightmare because they locked the Post down, on 9/12, and I was on Riley Road trying to get in for my first day of French. Gridlock all the way back to almost past Cliffdale, almost back to Morganton. I get up to the food line on Cliffdale, park my car in the parking lot because I'm like, I can't be late to my first day of like language school. So threw my books in a rucksack and I walked onto Post and to the bank hall where, French was being taught at that time. And they checked my ID. Nobody knew what they were doing to lock the post down. A lot of the third group guys were told to get on ATVs and start, they were giving units parts of the perimeter to secure. So it was nuts. It took about a week, almost 2, before they figured out, okay, this is how we let vehicles onto post efficiently. And basically to this day, that's what they do. But I don't know if it's gotten any better. It's still, it's always a chore getting on post, but yeah, so it was overnight. I mean, things just changed like that, but yeah,
It's a nexus event, right? That there was before 9/11, and
yep,
then everything changed. Like, in physics, the event horizon, right? When you go past that thing, nobody knew what was going to happen. And then all of a sudden it does happen. Well, how the fuck do we react now?
yeah,
And
yeah,
securing a post like Fort Bragg is ridiculous. I mean, there's all that training area and everything. Oh, fuck, how do we do this? We've never had to do it before. You just got to make shit up as you go along. And, oh, we're going to war soon. So you, you get to what was the mood during language amongst the students, because you're still mixed in with everybody and you have your group assignments and where you're going, right? We're the
yeah.
fifth
Everyone
group
knew
guys.
where they were going. The fifth group guys thought they were king. Again, like pre 9/11, SOF, like the pecking order of like where do you want to go as a SF guy was seventh group was number one if you wanted to deploy and maybe get shot at because they were fighting the war on drugs, right? That was still a thing. So they're still going to Colombia. They're still training people. There's some communists in the jungle down there. So, and it's cool because it's seventh group and cool place to. Then it was either first or 10th because of where you get to deploy to. Like it's cool to go to Southeast Asia or you get to live in Europe, you know. So those were like the top 3. And then it was, well, do you want to go to the desert and deal with people that live in the Middle East and go to fifth group? But who wants to do that? Or do you want to stay here at Bragg? You're not going to get a seventh group slot because you don't already speak Spanish. So your only choice is third group, and nobody wanted to go to third group. They're like, you deploy to Africa. There's all these like infectious diseases. There's all the deadliest snakes and things in the world trying to kill you. Besides the people you're working with, and oh by the way, third group's like the lowest funded group. They take everybody else's table scraps, so that quickly changed when all of a sudden fifth group leaves, third takes over Afghanistan. We're no longer going to Africa as much, and it's us in seventh group, and all of a sudden it's if you want to deploy to Afghanistan, you want to be in third group or seventh group. So, um, But yeah, that was the thing. And my wife was like, hey, if you're going to deploy and do these JSET things or whatever it was at that time, I want to be close to my family because her family was up in Virginia and West Virginia. So I was like, well, I know I'm not going to seventh group, so I'll pick third. That'll be my first choice. And everyone's like, you're crazy. Why would you pick third group as your first choice? But so it worked out.
Yeah, everything changes, right? You never know what's going to happen, especially, I mean, so you didn't know what was going to happen when you went to selection, right? You're just like, I don't think I want field artillery to be the rest of my life. What was the decision that you made at that point to move over? Did you just kind of look around and go, this isn't what I want for the rest of my life?
Yeah, I kind of have a weird, crazy way that as an officer, because I was a field artillery guy, um, decided for my back then there was an armor captain's career course and an infantry captain's career course, or the advanced course we called it back then, or field artillery. And I was like, I don't want to go back to Fort Sill. So I don't know. I probably didn't choose the right. I chose armor because I was coming from a mechanized unit. I thought tanks were cool. So I got stuck at Fort Knox, Kentucky, which was like, it's almost as bad as Fort Sill. Sorry to the people that live in Fort Knox. But so I went to a maneuver advanced course. So unbeknownst to me, that was a check in my favor for this later decision. I accepted orders to Europe as a brand new captain, was supposed to go straight to a field artillery unit, and I get scooped up by the USAR Army staff to work on the exercise and plans division as just an extra staff officer, as a brand new
Oh,
captain.
that sounds terrible.
The work was like not that great, but we were living in Heidelberg, Germany. My wife was happy, like it was gorgeous. We had a great time. And I sat next to a guy who was a 10th group guy, a guy named Gary Bloomberg, who had just come out of, he's senior captain, junior major. He 10th group guy, so he wanted to stay and live in Germany, and so he wanted to be on the staff. And as I started talking more and more about, man, I don't know if I want to be a battery commander, he's like, hey, we're still taking your group 94 guys, even though you're stuck here. Like you already went to a maneuver advanced course, you just need to make it through selection. So I put in a packet, was told immediately no, because it would be impossible to get me out of my European commitment that the Army's like, you have to serve in Europe for 2 years because you owe CONUS, you owe us that time for the money that it costs us to move you to Europe. I was like, hey, I'm on the USAR staff. And at that point, I was doing this big brief thing that was going straight to at that point, it was a 3-star that ran USAR. And I was like, oh, heard something. Sorry. Anyways, so this 3-star, I'm briefing him, and I was like, I can get him to sign a waiver. So if you guys will just let me go to selection, I guarantee you I can get a waiver to get out of Europe. They're like, there's no way. And I was like, no. So I got the waiver, sent it in. They're like, okay, maybe we'll take a shot on you. And I got told no again. So final shot, Gary Bloomberg said, hey, just email the branch chief, the Special Forces branch chief, which at that time was a guy named Lieutenant Colonel Charles Cleveland, who later becomes the USASOC commander. And he's like, hey, just tell him that you're going to get out of the Army unless you get to go to selection. 2 captains were like, perfect plan. So I type up an email, send it off, and get back. Sorry about my dogs. I get back an email that basically reads, Captain Sullivan, who the F do you think you are threatening the United States Army with you're going to leave if you don't get your way? He goes, I've shared your email with the field artillery branch chief. He said he no longer wants you in field artillery. So having said that, you get 1 shot at selection. If you don't make it, you're out of the Army as far as we're concerned.
You wanted to, your wife's like, oh, if you want to be part of the best, was that the real attraction? Was this is the best unit that I think I can get to with the tools I have available to me at the time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the mission itself, I mean, at that time in terms of I think one of the reasons I joined the military was to travel more and get to see different things. So the idea that working in a small team of this highly functioning individuals to go do that mission, whether it was foreign internal defense or maybe something cooler, that was very enticing to me. I mean, I grew up playing sports my entire life, and from what I heard from the sergeant major in ROTC and then my friend Gary, and when we were sitting there as captains, about the life environment. Hey, team life. The is that is definitely something I wanted to be a part of, right? I played college sports, Division III, but so the idea of being back on a small team where that's who you're relying on in the military was really something that I was drawn to as well. So, I mean, it was kind of like the perfect storm of like the thing I really wanted to do. And I mean, who else doesn't want to be, a special operator? It's like one of those things you grow up with, 80s kid watching all the movies, Commando, all those, anything with Arnold Schwarzenegger or somebody like shooting guns and blowing things up. I wanted to be a part of.
Yeah, what was your perception of what special operations was when you were a kid or coming in the military? Because everybody had this thought of what things were, and then it evolves into what things actually are.
No, I mean, I definitely probably had that vision of, the 80s action movies, that it's all these guys that could, hold a big machine gun with one arm and, take on a horde of aliens kind of thing. But um, I also had a realistic view, again, based on the stories and like the things I'd heard from. His name was Sergeant Major Quadra, the 7th Group guy. I mean, he had done a lot of work in South America, whether it was drug war stuff or working with the El Salvadorians. I mean, fighting like communism. So again, 80s kid that was like the units that were a part of like dismantling what the commies were trying to do around the world. You wanted to be a part of something like that. So I think I had a sense of who they were based on who these people were that I had been around in my life. And again, it was like, I really think I want to challenge myself and be a part of that.
That's it, right? The challenge. You just want to. It's always you always want something more to get after. The so what was selection like for you? Did you at any point going through selection, did you feel like you weren't going to make it, or what was the mood going there?
Um, I felt again, I wasn't challenged by any, even when they announced they're doing the thing with the star, and this was going to be a thing that's now, could bounce you. None of that really scared me. I mean, the great thing about being a field artillery guy is like the one thing that's drilled into you is land nav and like knowing where you're at on the planet. So, because you're shooting big bullets through the sky and you want them to hit the right spot. Um, so I was okay with that. I think some of the, because you don't know the standard. And back then, I think it was a little bit better. No internet, no cheat guides, no social media, nobody talking about like, hey, this is the event, this is how you should tie the knots to make the thing. You didn't really have any of that kind of G2. So there was a little bit of more of the unknown of like when you ran the 10K around the airfield out there at McCall, like, did I go fast enough? Because they're like, just do as best you can, and you're like, well, it's blazing hot. If I run too fast, I'm going to fall out and kill myself, which we had 8 guys medevaced on that run because they did cook themselves, like literally weren't hydrated. And they went down as heat injuries. It was horrible, but so that kind of questioning, I guess, is a little bit in the back of your head. And I felt like as long as I didn't get hurt, I would be okay. Like I felt like I was strong enough in terms of like the individual events that I was prepared. And then, I just felt if I just pulled as much as my own and other people's during team week, that I would be okay there as well, So it was more a matter of like, just don't get hurt. But I mean, I lost a lot of weight. My wife, when I came back from selection, was like, she's like, oh my, you lost I lost like 10 pounds. It was blazing hot. It was so miserable because it was in June. Because they had shoehorned this extra selection class in so they could revamp it for like post summer months. But yeah, I felt okay, pretty confident. I mean, I had some bad blisters. I got a little bit of cellulitis, like out there doing land nav, and they gave me some Cipro or something, and it knocked it out. Yeah. They're like, if this doesn't work, you're out of here. So it was stuff like that freaked me out. And I was like, man, I don't want something like this to keep me from continuing. But yeah.
Yeah, or at that point, getting out of the military.
Yeah, well, that too. You don't think about that at the time, though. You're just worried about making it through selection.
Yeah, selection's weird, right? Because they don't tell you anything. And I guess, yeah, right. In your era and before, there's no cliff notes on the internet. There's no, oh, this happened to me. Now, whereas there's whole training programs and businesses built around guys going to different selections or training courses in the military, which
Yeah.
to me is crazy because selection, came from a field artillery unit where they didn't even know what SF did. They didn't even know what they did, let alone another unit. And so I came from there. I trained myself in between the whatever I had to do during the day, and then even in the course. When we weren't in a course doing a class, we were just hammered. I mean, the whole time. I don't remember training up. You just went to this school, killed it, and then left and went off and just partied the whole rest of the time. I don't remember. So now there's guys focused on this thing and they make it their whole life and career to get through selection and the Q course. I don't remember any of that. Isn't that strange though? Because back then you just went and you just did it
Yeah.
with no knowledge. Why do they, that's part of the,
They,
I don't know, it's part of the thing, right?
yeah,
To
we still
keep
have
you,
like a booklet of like, hey, you know, make sure you're rucking this much, get this much time on your feet. I mean, I had my buddy who was a 10th group guy. There was a bit of a like, um, in terms of you don't give up anything about selection. So he wasn't giving me anything other than like, he was constantly questioning me like, hey man, how much are you rucking this week? Are you getting in your runs? How many pull-ups can you do now? Like, you got to work on your pull-ups. Like, so he helped me in that manner in terms of like physically like checking in on me to make sure I was prepared. Um, but yeah, in terms of like understanding like what you were actually getting yourself into and kind of some of the unknowns of whether it was a team week event or even like, having a better understanding of like the best ways to execute the star, I mean, all that was like discovery learning while you were there. Which I think is good, but there is, I guess, this question of, was there somebody that had they had a little bit more time to prepare that would have make, that are making incredible Green Berets now. And it's tied to this, like, you know, can you prepare somebody a little bit better? And we're not going to lose some talent that we shouldn't have lost on the front end because we were holding on to this idea that everything should just be pure grit and, you're good with just the unknown. So I think it's hard, right, to figure that out, especially with like living in an environment now where there's little unknown, right? Maybe you don't know exactly what's the truth, but there's so much on the internet. You have access to so much information. It's just a different cultural environment that I don't know if like you could even find those people that are just used to the idea that that you're not going to know or you're not going to have instant information from somebody. Like, you have to pick up a phone to call somebody. There's no such thing as text messages. It's yeah.
yeah. Yeah, part of me's, it's great to get this training up. But the other part of me's like, you should go in there and not know anything that's going on because that's part of it, right? You're going to be, it's getting you used to that stress of you're going to get situations where you don't know like what's going to happen and you're going to have to figure it out. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what selection is. Or how are you able to deal with shit? You don't know what's coming. You don't know how much effort you have to put in, but you have to do it to the best of your abilities and to come out the other side and still be able to do some other strange thing tomorrow. Is that kind of what you see in it?
Yeah, definitely. Right. And then you just have both the resilience to deal with it, right? And you can build the physical strength and endurance, but also it's a thinking man's game, right? Because again, not knowing what you have tomorrow, not necessarily knowing the standard for today, you had to assume, you had to like make some tactical choices, like, oh, I could beat everybody on this 10K run, but what happens if they
That
decide
was never me.
what? I was a runner, but I mean, but what happens if they decide later this afternoon that you're going to go on a 20K, ruck march? That's going to happen today, and even back then you had some sense of like, I know there's a bunch of rucking. I know there's these different running events. We got to do Nasty Nick. And then, you got to pull your own during team week. You had some G2. It wasn't completely an unknown, but but you are kind of gaming it. Like, what could be coming next? So do I give 100%, knowing that I may not have 100% for the next thing? and that thing could be the thing that bounces me out, which I think is part of the mentality that they're looking for, right? In terms of, can you put a person in this situation that they have some knowledge of what they're getting themselves into, but there's some ambiguity that they're going to have to deal with. Are they comfortable with that? Can they deal with it? And then can they come up with a plan to get themselves through that? It's not going to be the perfect plan, but it'll probably work, right? And if you can get, 12 of those guys together, there's some magic that happens, right? I think that's kind of the way I would describe it. But
You were in SF for like 23 years, right? So you saw a lot of new guys come down the hallway and to battalion and then to group. Did you see
yeah.
any changes, whether it's physically, mentally, or whether they're more prepared coming from that time of the start of the global war on terror through the end of Afghanistan? What was the major changes you saw in the soldiers coming out of the Q course?
Um, yeah, so I got to group when there was no direct enlistment. There were still some guys that were around from the first time they had tried that, the SF babies. But it was rare if you ran into an NCO that was like someone that came straight off the street. Uh, so all people that were prior service came with some sort of skills or baggage or whatever you want to call it from their previous MOS. So that was kind of the SF that I came into. It would be like midway through that time, as captain major, that we start seeing, hey, we're going to go back to this X-ray program, bring people in off the street. So there was definitely a different mentality between, and I think you even still see it today, between someone that's prior, that's in service recruit by someone that's off the street, just based on their understanding of how the Army works and what the expectation is for like special operations. Um, the, I guess, notoriety, media attention, whatever you want to call it, that we got during both Iraq and Afghanistan, especially the early days, I think drove maybe a little bit more understanding in some cases and maybe less in terms of like what we were doing. So again, like the mentality of folks that you got were like adventure seekers who thought that every night was a night raid, and maybe didn't understand like they were signing up for foreign internal defense and working with like Afghans and Iraqis. Um, so as opposed to the team I went to, they had just got back from Mali. They were cleaning their equipment the day I walked into the team room. They had been gone for 6 months on a JSET, and that's what they did. Once a year, we're going away for like anywhere from 3 months to 6 months. It's going to be awesome. We're going to train a bunch of like, infantry dudes in a foreign country, and then we're going to come home and it's going to be great. So that mentality, you saw that shift of losing those guys and that understanding of like what that looked like and applying that to the problem set in Iraq and Afghanistan, and more of just people that understand what we do in Afghanistan and Iraq with little, understanding of what a JSET looks like somewhere else in the world. You'd get some teams like for a while there before like we really started to spike, you would still have like an off battalion that got, everyone's like, oh, they're stuck still doing Afghanistan. But once 10th group took over Afghanistan from us and we were full on just doing Afghanistan rotations, like constant churn, that's pretty much all people knew, which was good for Afghanistan, but I think bad for that collective kind of understanding of how you problem solve in different environments and bring in that experience. I will say the greatest thing though, like the good thing for special operations was because of the, folks that wanted to be a part of that, what they were seeing on TV and hearing about in the news. You had probably dudes that were, well, I know that you had dudes that were much more fit and in shape, like much more prepared for like the grind of the physical grind of the job. And like, I would always joke, I was like, man, I couldn't keep up with half these guys if I was going through the course with them now. And then with the X-ray population, because you're getting like folks that are highly motivated, a lot of times it's guys that, were had some sort of college or whatnot. The interesting thing was you had a lot of NCOs that, based on their experience, were, I guess, came in with a different knowledge set. Like the way they thought about things was much more of a analytical, kind of more educated, kind of like not my life experiences of how I did stuff when I was a field artillery guy, but like book smart, right? Which isn't a bad thing, right? It gave you a different kind of look in terms of how you like problem solve from using a different knowledge base, So it was this weird mix that started to kind of come into the teams I saw, where you had to like, about half the teams were that way at one point, and now I think it's even, like 60% of the teams are more 18 X-rays than they are guys off out of units themselves. And with that, you also saw a different understanding of the Army, right? So I think we lost a little bit of that understanding of what we do for the larger Army when you had just people coming straight into SF, not understanding what the larger Army was doing around them. So I think there's something to that as well. But I mean, I'm a little bit jaded based on my experience, right?
Yeah, the X-ray program, you don't know what the rest of the Army's like unless you take the time while you're in group to figure it out, which nobody's going to do that.
No.
You don't know what it's like to be a private and just go suck and just, hey, private, go clean the shitter. We got to be here at 4 o'clock because we've got all that weird shit that you do, and get an understanding of how the Army works is lost on X-rays. But you do get some of the guys I went through. You had some of the smartest motherfuckers you'll ever meet, like legit
Yeah, I mean,
NASA rocket scientists at selection. I'm like, why? Oh, I just got bored. I just wanted to do something else. Oh, okay, fuck. Huh.
yeah. Yeah,
I,
when I was a company commander, we had an 18 Delta who had graduated from Georgetown, had gone into corporate America, again, wanted to serve, got tired of like, I think the way he told the story was in a Starbucks and heard someone bad mouth and like guys that were doing stuff in the service. He's like, you know what? That's what I want to be doing. Like I want to be one of those people. Screw these people that aren't understanding. Like, so he does that, did like 2 rotations to Afghanistan, was like, this was good. I enjoyed it. Got out, went back to Georgetown, went to law school, got his MBA, and like now he's making a bunch of money doing that. I think he still misses it. He had more time, misses the team, misses the, that environment. But that's the caliber of folks that you're seeing even now coming in. It's, you're seeing like what brought you to this. And it's like, I needed to challenge myself with a group of people that I think were like-minded. And I wasn't finding that in corporate America or at my graduate degree program. So.
I did hear, and this was disappointing to hear, from a couple people that work the support side at Robin Sage, right? And he said one result of that was you're getting kids coming in now that are just going through the 18 X-ray program to do one enlistment and get that street credit for their resume as being Green Berets and getting out.
Yeah, I think that was there. I think there are some of those guys. I think you're seeing less of that. I mean, I think there were some of these guys that wanted to get that street cred, and then they had plans like, this is going to help me with my business later on, or I can turn this into, some other type of thing that's going to help me out with whatever my career is, or maybe it's politics. So I think you have that. I think you're going to have that, especially, you know, in any high functioning like profession where someone can think they can get something out of it real quick and then move on. But I don't think it's the majority of guys. I will tell you one anecdote. So when I was the G3 at SWIC, buddy of mine's first battalion commander. He's like, hey, the boss is coming out. You should come out with him to see selection and what we're doing now. And that's when we were getting a lot more data centric. We were getting a lot of eyes on us that like, hey, all this stuff is, you're not really relying on data, and you got to do, look at things different ways. Why is it a 15-foot rope? What's the proof you're ever going to have to climb a 15-foot rope? So why is that on Nasty Nick? So we're getting all these questions. So they're going to like trying to be a little bit more analytical. And he's like, come out, we'll walk team week. The boss is going to come out with the CG. I'm going to give you a clipboard. He goes, but I'm not going to tell you any of like who's the roster number. You're just going to get roster numbers. And all I want you to do is write O or E next to everybody that's on the 20 guys that were on this start of team week lane. I got 50% of the x-rays wrong, and I thought they were officers because they were about the same age as a captain. They seemed just as like inexperienced in life as a captain would be. They were very like, book smart, intelligent, and talking about solutions on like tying knots and how we should do things in terms of carrying a device, where you definitely understood the guy who probably just like the guy's like, that dude's a Ranger Regiment dude. And he's a E6 or probably an E7. And the guy's like, yeah, absolutely. That dude. because he was like, can you guys just shut up and quit talking about like the smartest way to tie a knot? We're all going to put this on our back and just walk, you know?
Yeah.
NCO told the officers to shut up and they started moving. But that was kind of the interesting dynamic as well, is you introduce the difference between dudes that have life experience and an understanding of how to get things done in the Army. They're just as intelligent, but they're not going to like care like if the knot is tied exactly right based on the physics class they got out of as a rocket scientist, you know? Whereas typically I think that would have been dudes like me, officers who thought, you know, I got my 4 years of education, I'm a really smart dude, like this is what I can apply to this team of dudes, is my brain and expertise in terms of how smart I am. I think there was a dynamic there that still exists with the X-rays, especially the guys that have completed college, or because again, there is a push, like there'd been a push in the military to get like, well, all the NCOs need to get their college degree now too, but those guys are doing it like at night, or maybe they're, you know, waiting until they're an E8 or an E9 again. So there is a different mentality, I think, that's brought when you're told you're a really intelligent person because you went to college. Maybe true, maybe not. So just an anecdote, may not be true, just my observation though.
It's the greatest scam that's been perpetrated on the youth of America that we've ever seen. That and taxes, but yeah, you do, maybe you do think you're smarter if you have a college degree, but junior enlisted guys, they're actually in the Army, where these captains, they're in charge of the Army. But if you're in a unit with a good team and a good unit, and you're doing table eights and you're firing and working as a team, selection team week, there's an Army way to easily accomplish all those things, and you just put your unit metrics into it. And that Ranger Regiment, you spoke of him, there is no more unit in the military than Ranger Regiment. They are professional at everything, especially sucking. And they know, hey, they can look at a problem and go, the only way out of this is to just suck it up and carry that shit out of here. And especially them, because there's no going back to Ranger Regiment. You're going to get kicked out, relief for cause, when you get back. So those guys, you could tell them apart at selection. You go, that dude has everything to lose by being here, and he'll carry all these people and all that gear on his back if he has to, just so he doesn't have to go back to Ranger Regiment and get kicked out.
True statement.
I felt bad for those guys, and I didn't know it till later. Why I realized, because I was a private, I didn't know that what even Ranger Regiment was a thing, and I didn't understand that the only way out of Ranger Regiment was Delta. I didn't even know what Delta was at that point, and I felt bad for this cat at selection. He crushed the runs, he crushed the rucks, land nav, and then team week just separates his knee, right? Just bad. Oof. And he's sitting on the back. He had to be in god awful pain. But just looked at this perfect soldier that you would think on a poster, right? Yeah. And the deflated look he had looking off into the distance, knowing his career was over. And I always think about that guy right there going, I wonder what happened to that guy, because there's no reason he wouldn't have gone on to do great things. But because of the unit he was in, he was probably going to get shit on and sent to some regular infantry unit, and his life was over. I always wonder what happened to that guy. And that's pretty shitty to think about,
right? Tough. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah, I will say this, like, I realized this probably when I became a battalion commander, kind of this idea of like our place in the Army as special operators. Because guys complaining about having to do like Army stuff, right? And I was like, hey, the special on our arm should mean that we can out Army the Army. If there's an Army task, we should be able to do it better than anybody else in the Army. Like that, like if you want us to run a range, we can run it better than any person that has ever run a range ever in the Army. Tie our boots the correct way, whatever it is, we can out Army the Army. Then I kept saying that, like, that's where you guys got to like embrace this. The special doesn't mean you get to grow your hair out, put your hands in your pockets, and unblouse your boots. Sure, that's a perk, and I like to do that same stuff, right? But you should be able to out Army the Army. the Ranger Regiment lives that, right? There is no better Army unit than the Ranger Regiment, right? They're going to do everything to standard, at standard or beyond, right? So I think those guys like that really have something to offer when it comes to that understanding. But yeah, that was a huge thing. Like me growing up in the Army, field artillery. Like if you wanted to go to Ranger school as an officer, and our battalion commander was not a Ranger tabbed guy, you were dead. You were dead to him. Like, don't even think you're going to be a captain now. Don't say Ranger School out loud and 137
Really?
Field Artillery, because he just had a chip on his shoulder for the guys that had a tab. So like it was weird. The same thing like special oper. When I decided I was going to go SF, I had a couple, mentor like ROTC instructor who was also my football coach, who was a major in the infantry at that time, and I was like, hey man, this is what I'm thinking about doing. He's like, all right, hopefully you're successful because your career's over. Like those guys suck. Like, I mean, there was that was a real thing. The conventional soft hate was like definitely a deal. And it didn't matter if you were any unit, you went to selection, like it was a bad deal. Unfortunately, I think there's some of that coming back where you hear the stories of the guys not getting their, paperwork signed by their battalion commander, sorry, we can't let you do that. It's going to be bad for you. That's the worst. Like I dealt with those guys in Afghanistan. They always stole our, MREs. The stories are, it's kind of funny how everything old is new again. I think there's some of that coming back in the Army.
You know as well as I do, it's more often than not, it's the guys that think they're badass because they're attached to us doing stupid shit, and they blame it on us because, oh, those are coming from the SF guys on the compound. And
there's some stupid SF guys too.
Oh no, there are, but all those little stories like that one, stealing MREs, that's some shithead supply sergeant going, oh, I got to figure out how to do this. But no, it only takes one bad interaction with an SF guy to wipe out all the good interactions the unit will have. And then that story will permeate through a regular Army unit. I was at a Soldier of the Year board, and this was I don't know if he was a post sergeant major, or he was the basic training sergeant major. And we're in board, and he's giving me a hard time, and I just did not know why. And it's because I'd gotten selected, and he did not like that. I found out from an officer later that he had it out for special forces guys. He hated them. He thought they were disrespectful and unprofessional. And I went, and I was talking to this captain who's telling me all this. I went, Rob, I'm in a Soldier of the Year board. Obviously, I mean, there's 3 other guys from the post, the whole post there. Obviously, I'm professional. Why is he giving me a hard time that I got selected? Obviously, I'm right at the top, and he's shitting on me because I'm a loser. I just didn't get that. I was like, he must have had a bad experience.
Yeah. I think there's also, it still exists, this assumption that everything's easier for us. Like we're given all the best gear and you get all this stuff and everybody else has to struggle for it. So you guys are, because you're special, you have all these privileges. And I think it's lost on some folks that like that was earned. Like, it wasn't because like I didn't just walk through selection. I made it. The Q course wasn't the easiest course in the world. Like there's still only a 70 to 80% like graduation rate. Like we still lose a bunch of people there. So it was interesting. I think you saw like over the time of like the GWAT, like again, the hate kind of got worse before it got better. And then everybody kind of saw the value of like what the teams were doing in and around where they were trying to do work, whether it was Iraq and Afghanistan. So then there became sort of some mutual respect on each side. And then it seemed like as it peaked, because I think, again, we were kind of in the lead of basically everything when it came to fighting terrorists. I think that put a chip on a lot of guys' shoulders. Those guys continue to get promoted. And now we're back to like, if we're going to fix the military, we got to like put these guys back in their box and like focus on these conventional guys, which not saying you don't need to focus on getting the Army back to warfighting, but don't lose that goodness of what you had in terms of like the height of like the GWAT between the two.
Yeah, the Army had to adapt for 20 some years, right, to a completely different mission set. We had to bring Vietnam back, prolonged, entrenched war, and there's no experience left from that generation. It's now distilled because those guys in '76, most of the guys got out, right? No, they didn't stay in. So you have very few people that stayed in, and then all the knowledge doesn't get passed on. And now 2001 through 2020, what was it, 22 or 23? Um, that's all gone. So we had to adapt and learn a whole way of doing things. How long do you think it's gonna take till we either decide to get into another entrenched conflict, or we get back to the mission that we had before, especially in SF, right?
Yeah, I think I've seen this change. I mean, the guys. I mean, it's been a little bit slow. I mean, because there's some frustration, right? I mean, I got twins, a daughter and a son who are in the army, and they're frustrated. Their captains are like, because we thought we were joining the army that we saw you participate in, and we thought we are going to go fight these prolonged wars, which we heard stories about and saw on the news and all this stuff. And that's not what the army is these days. So it's whether you want to see it as cyclic or kind of a wave. It's just what the army kind of goes through. And special operations are a part of that. I think there's guys are embracing like this idea of like back to the FID, get back to our AORs. We should get smart on what's going on. So you're seeing the goodness there. I mean, there's still some frustrations of you still have the guys on the teams though that are now the team sergeants that are like, man, I miss the nights of like every other night we're going on a raid, we're kicking in a door, we're blowing up walls, we're doing cool things. Um, so there's still a mix of that, but it's good because there's shared experience, like because that stuff's not. You're still going to have to fight probably that way in different places in different ways, but um, yeah, I think the good thing for the army, like I politics aside, like I'm a historian by trade, and I'm like Ukraine is like this. It's the Spanish Civil War of our era. Like we're just going to continue to pump like tactics, techniques, and procedures and equipment, see what works, what doesn't, and then we'll all be ready for World War II. It's kind of like in maneuver warfare is invented. So I think we're gonna. You're seeing a completely different way things are being fought compared to what we dealt with. Some of it's terrifying. I was like, man, I just had to worry about things blowing up underneath me, not like things coming out of the sky. Um, so I think the Army will adapt. Unfortunately, the U.S. Army will probably pick the wrong thing to adapt to. But the good thing about Americans is we get really good at like doing specific things that can be applied across like whatever situation we find ourselves in. And the distributed nature of like empowerment down to the lower ranks isn't going away. So I think getting back to like basics and understanding our weapon systems and how you can employ them, SF guys understanding all of that and how you can get like a group of indigenous folks to support you. Um, I think we'll be successful. It may be ugly for the first little bit, like it always is for us, but Americans will adapt like nobody else, and then we'll get back after it. And then we're at the whims of whoever's in charge in terms of if they give us all the tools we need, or we're kind of stuck, maybe not being able to execute as much as we want to. And it turns protracted. I mean, my opinion, I'm not an expert on foreign policy or anything, but things probably could have gone a lot faster in different places if we would have had a different approach.
Oh, there's always different choices you can make, but it's interesting you said that, right? Like Ukraine, we're for once we're not sacrificing our military to learn what the cutting edge of warfare is, right? Usually we're just diving, every war, the technology has been so far ahead of the tactics that, humans pay the price, right? So now you're seeing, unfortunately, these armies that are well under equipped being beaten by 21st century technology. And that's crazy. And we keep dumping. Hopefully, a unit like ASW or something is taking notes on all these things and implement all these lessons learned into future actions and training. I
Yeah.
hope they are. I'm
No,
sure somebody
absolutely.
is.
Yeah, there is. There's folks doing it.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see. We'll see. But then you got to have force them to go down to lessons learned and get the information right. Where everybody just wants to do CQB training and go to
Yeah.
Sephardic.
Actually, like read manuals and doctrine instead of just like, yeah.
Or, God, attention spans have changed, right? Or showing a team, hey, look at these reels. Look at these reels. This is actually what's happening. We need you to understand that you're going to have to learn from this 30-second clip. Okay, how do we defend against this? or something like that. But the Army's military, the government in general, has never been good about understanding what technology is and what they have to do to adapt to it. Did you
Yeah.
see that change during your time in command?
I think so. I mean, again, the power I think of like the folks that we select and that are in our ranks is that typically it's you don't completely throw out the manual when it gets there. Understand how it works, what it can be used for, and then what you saw is like an SF guy is going to adapt its like purpose to use it in a more effective manner, than maybe what it was made for, right? So again, I think some of the greatest innovation happens when you give a Special Forces ODA some new kit, tell them, hey, this is what this is used for. This is how we think you should use it. And then they come back, whether it's after training with it or being downrange and be like, okay, this is what we used it for, and this is how it will work better. Like, so, it's, and they'll adapt, you know, and figure out how to overcome weaknesses of maybe that piece of equipment. You, it, for me, I mean, I saw teams get better throughout all my rotations in Afghanistan at what they were doing. And if you really looked at it, we were putting restriction on them. Like if you just talked about the physics of like an RG, like we were locking them to a road, like with this heavy piece of equipment that was going to save them lives just in case they hit an IED. But they had to get out of that somehow, still use it as a platform, figure out how to use it most effectively. You had guys monster garaging miniguns on the top of RGs and getting in trouble for it because you're gonna tip it over once you fire the minigun. I was like, this is insane. Like they just figured out how to put the most effective weapon that we could have, short of air support, to just mow down the other side of the river down in the Helmand Valley. So I mean, you just saw that kind of stuff and that kind of ingenuity. I think is like the strength of like an Army Special Forces guy, right? That's what we select for. Is we're going to give you something, or we're going to give you a partnered force. We think we know the book says this is how you should use it, and 9 times out of 10 they're going to go, that's great, this is how we're going to use it, and it's more effective than what you expected. But you got to be willing to be comfortable with that kind of flexibility and an authority being pushed down to you know a captain and a bunch of NCOs that are going to try to convince the captain that he doesn't even know what he's doing. So
Yeah, but got to give them the leeway to do
yeah,
those sorts of things, right? And that goes back to what you said earlier. We need to be good at the regular Army shit
right, you got to
because
have the basics down perfect, right?
as one officer I had on here said, or no, it was another guy, admin. You're a shitty soldier or a shitty commander if your admin and paperwork isn't taken care of. But if it is, everybody will leave you alone, right? You can go
Yeah,
do whatever the fuck you want to do as a team as long as you're not red on dental. So it just gets back to the basics of, that team sergeant, that commander. You can have a very successful team that can do whatever the hell you want to do as long as you put admin first on the fun thing for the week. Is that what you saw? As guys wouldn't be squared away up front, and then it would suffer for it later?
yeah, they would suffer for it later. They would suffer in terms of they wouldn't get the same permission, authorities, and like trust from the chain of command as the ones that did. You know, you had to put the two together, right? I mean, you would see the teams that would just focus on admin and all their paperwork would be great. They'd have the visitor book for their range, right? But then you got to the range and you're like, these guys can't shoot straight. What's going on? You know, you're spending too much time on admin. Like the window dressing's great. You figured that part out, but you have to do the rest because, you know, I can't trust you to do this if you can't do that. The greatest teams did both, right? To your point, like they figured out, like, hey, we have a responsibility. We'll out army the army. We'll make the battalion commander happy. We will not be read on anything the army says we're supposed to be read on. Did they probably figure out a way to put the junior guy on the computer so everybody's computer training was done? Probably, right? But
What are you talking about, sir? What do you
no,
mean? Why would you even insinuate that?
I don't know.
That
I'm
hurts
not
me as
saying
an
it
SF.
happened.
That's,
But
that hurts.
yeah,
That
but I mean,
hurts.
they figured that out. But they also were the team that like their stress event at the end of the range was like perfect. And it was like, how did these guys are killers? Like the perfect package, right? And then you had the group that would only go to the range and you're like, well, I can't trust them because their con-ops are going to look like crap. And the CGSOTF commander is going to tell them like, no. And I can't have them say no. I can't have him say no to those guys because they can't they don't understand the squiggly red line on a Microsoft PowerPoint slide. It means that's not spelled correctly, right? So,
Oh, is that what that
it
is?
yeah,
Oh,
it is.
the
Learn
files are
something new every
in the
day.
computer. The files are in the computer.
They're in the computer. It's genius.
So obviously, you get out of the Q course, you get to third, you take a team right away, or did you go,
I did.
you go to the BC and say, "Sir, what do you got
No,
for me?"
back in my day, they were short captains across a lot of the teams. SF had ghosted all the six teams, so there was only five per company. They had the
Okay, yeah.
equipment and the rooms for the six team per company, but they only had enough people, and even then, you had like maybe 10 if you were lucky on your team. A lot of four or five of the teams in first battalion third group were commanded by the warrant officer because they didn't have a captain. So that's kind of what I was walking into, so which was lucky because I was walking straight into a team. Um,
How long did you get in the
yeah.
seat?
What's that?
How long did you get to stay on the team?
Uh, it was short of 2 years for me.
Okay, so
Yeah, I got to the team. That's a great story. The former team leader thought he would set me up for failure. I was signing in to the, S1 in my uniform. He walks up. He's in Ranger panties and a t-shirt. Looks at my name tape and goes, "Oh, Captain Sullivan, you're coming to my team." Doesn't introduce himself. I assumed because he said my team that he was like maybe the team sergeant or one of the senior NCOs. Like, I don't know, because the guy I had in the Q course was like, never call the team your team, like as a captain. Like, you just don't do that. Um, so that's my assumption, which was a bad assumption. We walked down. He's like, "Yeah, we just got back from Mali." We walked down to the company area, walk into the team room, and he's like, "Hey guys," and they're all in there cleaning equipment. Bunch of meat eaters. They're looking at me like, "Who's this guy in his uniform? Like, who's this captain?" And he goes, "Hey guys, I just met Captain Sullivan. He told me on the whole way down here how he can't wait to make this team his team, and he's going to let you guys know that he's the new guy in charge." And immediately I'm like, "Well, one, I never said that, and two, who is this guy?" At which point one of the guys go, "Captain, this guy really said that?" And I was like, "Oh, this is the old team leader. He thinks he's being funny."
that's not funny
No,
at
it wasn't
all.
funny. And like, I had a guy from Georgia who was my Fox, and he's just like, "You think you're gonna do that? You're gonna come up here, get on the computer, and just run the whole thing from this team?" We had a little like platform in our team room where the captain and the team sergeant sat at their desk with the one computer in the room, and I was like, "Nope, that's not what I'm gonna do." I go, "I never said any of that." There was like a folding chair against the wall. I go, "I'm gonna sit in this chair for like the first like 3 weeks. You guys are the greatest trainers in the world, right? You're Green Berets. You're going to train me on how to be a good team leader. And at that point, I'll start doing my job and being responsible for everything this team does. If you guys can't do that in 3 weeks, then I guess I'll become an asshole and I'll start telling you guys what to do." I go, "Because clearly you need someone in charge." I go, "So I'm just not going to say anything. I'm going to come in every day, do whatever you guys are doing, do what I'm told. And then maybe 3 weeks from now, we can talk about like what my role is on the team. But I'm pretty sure it's to make sure that I'm doing the paperwork, keeping you guys out of trouble with anybody that's in charge of us, and we'll get along really well together if I guess we do that together." And at which point the guy from Georgia goes, "Old captain, get your shit. You're off the team. We like this new guy. He's going to shut up and listen to what we tell him to do. You never did that." So it worked out great from there on out. But the yeah, so I got about 20 months on the team. I was told I could go to um, a specialty team because back then that was a second command for a captain. You didn't go straight into a Halo or a scuba team. They were standing back up the third scuba team. None of my, I thought, well, I was like, "Hey, we're a five team. We're going to come to the scuba team." Everyone on the team's like, "We're not going to dive school, captain. Like, that's not our thing." So I started to get ready for dive school, and the battalion commander's like, "You're not going to dive school. You're going to be the AS3 for the next rotation." So I was, I was completely pulled out of the company and up to staff, which was probably good because I'm not the greatest swimmer. I probably wouldn't have made it through dive school.
Oh, I swim 3 days a week. I dedicate myself to the pool. It's one of my big things in my training regimen, and I still can't pass dive school. There's no way. So I feel you there. Um, Imagine that interaction's flipped, right? You're a master sergeant walking down, and the outgoing team sergeant does that. That's a good way to get punched right in the fucking mouth,
Yeah.
you know. But a captain can, quite a bit junior time in the military comparatively, and just kind of thinks he's being funny. But you bring a 20-year veteran onto the team, and you say that stupid shit, you can get knocked right the fuck out in the team room
Yeah.
right there.
I mean, he knew I had captain's rank on in my name, so he knew exactly what he was doing. But yeah, oh, that would have been bad. Yeah.
We're gonna establish some discipline right fucking now. So, how was it? How was it being a team leader? Was
No,
it
it was
everything you thought it would be?
absolutely, you leave as an officer, you leave the team and you're trying to figure out how could I have stayed on the team for the rest of my life. Um, no, I had an absolute amazing team. Luckily, I got on one of those teams that trained their asses off and they knew that they had to do the other things right as well. A lot of that was on the captain. They're like, Captain, your job is admin. Don't screw it up. I was told by my company commander at one point I was the worst um, officer team leader because my stuff was always, I didn't know what the red squiggly line. He's like, you misspell things all the time. Like, you got to get better at this. So you're going to, like, once you become a major, you're on staff and your career is going to be over because you suck at paperwork, Sullivan. So, but I took it personal, and I worked on it. Um, but they set me up for success, it was all of them, but it set me up to be the AS3, which is usually like one of the better team leaders they pick for that job. But I loved my time on the team. Those guys were amazing, and then, but I enjoyed each one of like the jobs I had too. I never pined away so bad that I couldn't like get my head wrapped around like the next responsibility and the next thing. Um, Obviously command for me, like I know there's some weird guys out there, officers that don't mind doing staff work or doing other kinds of things. But any chance that I had and the opportunities I had to be in charge and be around people that were that high functioning and, you know, uh, continue to be their team leader just at a different level was, I mean, I loved it. But I had two rotations as a captain. So we did the one with the A and the next we were out in Oregon E. So we were out at a fire base early on. We usually just got rocketed, never really got into much of anything that rotation. Everyone stayed safe, luckily, though, even though the Thursday night rockets would come in before the call to prayer for the weekend. Um, then I went to the staff that third trip. That sucked because, like, the first week, my team goes out and gets in this major firefight. So one, I'm just like, I'm worried about the guys, but two, I'm like, man, are you serious? Two rotations and they're finally like doing some amazing crap. Uh,
Just missed
but
out on.
yeah,
Just
but I
missed
mean,
out
I
on getting it.
threw myself into it. Being a battle captain, you saw your role of like what you could do for the teams when they were out there in the stuff. Um, and then my fourth trip was probably one of my better trips in terms of like, if you're in it for the combat and getting to do the thing. As a company commander, I was in the Helmand province, and we had kind of a phenomenal rotation of big stuff going on. And we came up with this great idea of like this kind of operational plan to trick the con-op process. So we did one back then, the 75 slide con-op. We did one con-op, but I said it was a 3-month con-op and I would Frago off it with 3 slide Fragos for the next 3 months. And C just sort of bought it as like a new concept. So we were able to like get away with like just going out almost every other day doing things without having to do all the work. So,
And
and it
the
was a
SF,
great, yeah,
finding the SF way to do things.
yeah, it was good. And it was the first year that we could target like Nexus drug targets in the South because we didn't want to get in a drug war, even though that was what was funding the Taliban. Um, so we did a lot of big ops kind of hitting. We let the whole, you know, season of harvest go with the poppy. They consolidated to one spot where they didn't think we could get to it. We knew it was a Taliban like C2 node and like where they had all. And so we had an amazing op where we, 3 days air assaulted like 60 SF dudes, some SEALs, a bunch of commandos, and we just locked down this village and destroyed all the poppy and just got shot at for 3 days. It was awesome. One of the best 3 days of my life. Um,
Just one of
but
those crazy things as an SF guy you do and just go, yeah, just another day at the office. It was
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, it was great. I mean, we knew like we're gonna get surrounded from the start. I mean, we geared this like a series of ops hitting smaller like storage places in the Helmand along the river. So they would push all the stuff into Marja. And we had, some folks that were telling us what was going on because SF guys were working with the right dudes on the ground. So we had a good shot. We knew where the majority of the stuff was at. And so we put together this thing. The 160th put us in on a bunch of, Chinooks in the middle of the night. And we locked this place down. But we knew, hey, we're in the middle of this place back then that nobody had gone into. And it was kind of locked down by the Taliban and the drug dealers. And we joked about it. We're like, this is a new technique. It's called the offense. It's an offensive move to set up a defensive perimeter to make them come to you so you can kill them. But we did have a warrant officer. The last brief we did, he's like, hey, we were like sitting around a table. He's like, I just want to say it. He goes, are we really doing this? Like, we all know we're going to get surrounded. There's no way to drive out because we have no vehicles, but besides a few ATVs, and there's no way they can drive in to get us. So basically, we just got to hold this thing and be good enough that the helicopters can come back in at the end of the 3 days and get us out. He goes, this kind of sounds like a bad plan. And I was like, that's the plan, Chief. I was like, anybody else think it's a bad plan? We're like, we all think it's a bad plan, but it sounds like it's going to be epic. So we're all in. He's like, I just wanted to be the guy that said it. And I was like, all right, we'll put that in the book. Still hasn't been written.
Well, I mean, well, you think of it, look at something like that, there's a lot of bad plans. You're probably only one intel report that there's something there that you didn't know was there away from a lone survivor too, you know?
Yeah. Now they had 3 Dishkas in the area that we had taken out with strikes beforehand, but we were like, what if there was actually 4,
Yeah. So,
and what's the odds that it's right in the area that we're landing that night? Like, a Dishka would be a bad day for like 6 Chinooks coming into this area, right? So,
I was just rewatching, that new. Have you seen that new Netflix special, Black Hawk Down, Surviving Black Hawk Down?
Yep.
And we're watching it, and my wife's on her phone, and she looks up. She goes, "Why are they doing it during the day?" And I went, "Well, there's a lot more going on here, honey, but I'm not going to armchair quarterback this. This is things here, but that's a real life situation. You finally encounter something you didn't know was going to happen, and then shit goes sideways real fast. That warrant officer, he wasn't wrong sitting there.
I mean, we did have 3 guys. No one got killed. We had 3 guys get shot, and medevaced out. The last medevac was a bit hairy. We were taking mortar rounds as like the Air Force CSAR bird went in there. But thankfully everybody lived. Everybody's, got all working things and didn't lose any limbs but there was a couple points where like, man, maybe this was a bad idea. When thankfully for us, the Taliban sucked and they couldn't figure out how to mass their firepower on one side of the objective. But
yeah. What's that like? The plan was we're going to be surrounded, but then you do get surrounded and you go, oh, well, got to not die now. And there's bullets cracking past you, and at least they're spray and pray. They're not direct fire like we trained, shoot at a target and hit it. They trained to shoot at a building and hit the building.
Yeah.
So what's that like? You're surrounded and there's bullets flying now. Like, oh fuck.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of like, probably some overconfidence based on the fact that we owned the sky, right? And we had dedicated casts. So they were smart enough to stop shooting when the Apaches would show up. The British Apaches would not fire into the woods if you weren't being fired upon. That was a bit maddening when you knew exactly where you were just getting shot at, but the helicopters show up, so they stop. Americans didn't have that problem. You could get a A-10 to come in and do a gun strafe on a wood line that just shot at you, even if it wasn't still shooting at you. There was a couple of times where things got, they did get close and pushed into a couple spots, and you had to push it back. We had kind of like worked through this technique or whatever you want to say, and as a team on those other smaller objectives. So we were pretty good at understanding like how we were going to pass off and share casts. We had a controller with each one of the elements. That the city just happened to be gridded out. So, it's cardinal directions for each one of the strong points, with kind of a flex force with the SEALs and some commandos in the middle that could fill gaps. But I mean, we did have some guys that were accurate. So the 3 guys that got shot were all hit by like sniper rounds. Like, and they ended up taking out the guy they thought it was later on like day 2. Because he was cracking off some accurate shots. But you do stupid things too, right? Like bullets are flying. We picked for my CP, there was a tall house that had like this kind of tower, 3-story tower in the middle of its compound. So we picked that because I could see the whole little ville and from up there. But they had this weird room that had windows on either side. I'm in there with the guys that are listening to their radios. I'm talking on like 3 radios to my guys and the guys at battalion and other stuff. And the window behind me starts getting peppered, and I'm getting hit in the back of the head with glass. Of course, I'm not wearing my helmet. And of course, my response is, "Hey, close the curtains so they can't see us." You know what I mean? you make crazy, stupid decisions like that at times, but yeah, there's probably I don't there's probably some luck involved in some of this stuff, but I mean, we had a really good idea of what was going to come and how it would come at us, So, and thankfully, because that area was controlled by them, we knew that we weren't going to go into a place that was full of like IEDs or anything even rigged in terms of like the little C2 note we found with their maps and all their stuff. I mean, they hightailed it out as soon as the helicopters came. We shot a bunch of them. They all like changed their clothes. They tried different tactics. Like, hey, we know there's wounded guys in there. I'm just a farmer. Can I drive in here with my truck? We're like, yeah, turn your truck around or you're gonna get shot at. No, okay, you shoot the engine block at the truck. They leave. The At one point the governor of Helmand gets on. I get a call. You got to call the governor because he wants you guys to stop this thing. There's a local business owner that's really upset that you're in that village right now. And I'm like, we're not stopping. Like that business owner sells poppy. Like we're not. He sells. So, but
Yeah, I mean, they're going to try everything they can to keep that
yeah,
revenue stream going, and
yeah. So
you're
it was good. I think we found out later there's probably another like third of the harvest that was over in another part of the area that we couldn't get to. And they saw it getting loaded up and moving towards basically the Iranian border. We couldn't get to it. They didn't have anybody else to like put on that target. So that got away. But we felt that it was a good op because it did kind of take a dent in that area. And that was right before the Marines kicked off their surge. They were building Camp Leatherneck. They were about to, go crazy in the Helmand province. So, I mean, they dealt with a lot, but we're hopeful that maybe they didn't deal with as much as they had because they lost a lot of revenue on that op.
yeah, well, they'll make it back.
Who knows?
We
Yeah.
we left them a lot of gear for their troubles when we did pull out of there, so they got us back in the end.
Yeah.
So you get off the team, and my notes here. So did you do the full spread, team, company, battalion, and group?
I didn't do group. So I
Oh,
did team, company, and then came back. That was in first of third. And then I came back. I was the 3-3 battalion commander. Um, First year was our last kind of foray for 3rd Battalion into Afghanistan at that time because I was there for the end of OEF, start of RSM. We were the only SOTF left at that time. We went down from 5 to 1 battalion in a year in Afghanistan. So things got a little dicey. We had companies now in like Kandahar and out in the east and kind of central where we used to have like 5 battalions. So that was an interesting rotation as well as like going into RSM where we weren't supposed to be going out, but they're like, you guys can still go out. You have different authorities. So we were basically still doing the same thing, just with less stuff and less people. So that was my last trip to Afghanistan. And then when I got home, third group took Africa back from 10th group at that time. So I had the first group of third group guys going back into the African continent to start doing JSETs and the like. Most of it was going to Northwest Africa where you had basically, Islamic terrorists doing their thing in like Chad, Niger, that area. So we were training those folks. So that was great kind of getting back after that environment. There were still some older NCOs, sergeant majors, some E8s that were around like me pre 9/11 that knew how to do that stuff, how you got to the continent, what life was going to be like. So that was great to be a part of kind of like a different complete mission set than what I saw for, almost whatever, 15 years as an SF guy. Left 3rd Battalion, and back to my other story. Like I was so old, I got promoted on time to colonel my last 3 months of battalion command, and picked for command. Well, I didn't get picked up for group. What I got was called a SOC forward. So SOCOM and USASOC used to have 306 commands that were a year long that were in the Middle East. I got SOC forward Lebanon. So I went off to the War College for a year, and then as an 06, I went into the embassy in Beirut. I had like me and 3 other guys, a sergeant major, an ops officer, and like an intel kid. And then any joint special operations element that was doing kind of the FID mission with the Lebanese SOF units primarily. So we had about 200 operators between SEALs, SF, MARSOC, some AFSOC guys that were helping them with their Air Force stuff. They all fell underneath SOC Forward Lebanon. So I provided them authority, guidance, worked directly for the ambassador. Me and the DAT were the 2 senior U.S. military officers in the country. So it was an amazing experience. Like if you just want to like real life Game of Thrones country, Lebanon, with like it's the dynamics of the different religions, how they set up their government. It's a phenomenal place too in terms of you could see like it could be a jewel of the Mediterranean. It was at one point the Paris of the Mediterranean, but you could be in the Med on the beach during the day and then go up skiing at like ski lodges in the wintertime, because you have the mountains that separate the country. But cool mission. ISIS still had a pocket in the northeast part of the country. So we got to be there to help them put together the entire kind of operation to push those guys back out, back into Syria where they could get dealt with there and then lock down the country. So it was awesome. As a colonel, I'm interacting with like the chief of defense weekly, briefing him on what we were doing, what his guys were doing, working together on plans. It was kind of like the, pinnacle of being able to pull everything together if you're a 18 Alpha and get to do something cool like that. But it's only a year long. So I did that for a year. It's unaccompanied. And then I came back and ended up at SF Command as the 3 chief of staff. And then I thought I was going to get out. I'm done. I'm retiring then it would have been like the 25-year mark, 26-year mark. And I got a call from the USASOC commander. He says, "Hey, I've secured one of the SFABs for an SF guy to command, and we think you should be that guy. So do you want to do a second command? Because it has to be a second command. That's the way the Army set them up." And I was like, yeah, if I get to be a commander again and try to figure out like unique problem sets and get this going for the Army. So I went to second SFAB because it was aligned to Africa. They're like, you're a 3rd group guy. You're already at Bragg. We'll put you in second SFAB. And that was right at, then COVID hits and then Afghanistan's getting shut down. The SFABs were the only conventional units rotating to Afghanistan. But they turned that off and immediately like, we got to figure out how to geographically align these things like the SF groups are. We're not sure how to do that. And it was just like the easy problem for me because I was like, well, I was the G3 at SF Command. So I understand authorities and permissions and everything for like, non-combat deployments for JSETs, MTTs, whatever, how you use the authorities, the State Department money. I was like, this is going to be easy. Like, I'll get the teams deployed. So, and then you just had carte blanche, like as an SF guy, figure out how to get small teams prepared to deploy for 6 months on their own and train foreigners how to do stuff. I was like, oh, this is going to be an easy problem set. So it was interesting working through like with a bunch of conventional guys that wanted to do something a little bit different, understanding like authority as a captain to be alone in a country as like the senior person potentially that's representing the military. Like a lot of those kind of courses and classes and testing in our like pre-mission training in terms of like what you put the teams through. Had a lot of hard discussions like team PT, like coming out of COVID and everything else. And like, you're going to do it together at minimum 3 times a week. And that's when you're going to find out who on the team is going to be the problem on month 4 in Senegal because his life problems are going to come out during a hard PT session, not, on a flat range. So everybody's doing PT in second SFAM. But it was a great time. We had 17 of the 20 teams because you had a 20 team package that would go every 6 months, deployed by the time I left to 9 different countries. We were working hand in hand with third group guys. It was fun to see it happen. Unfortunately, the Army's kind of pulling away from that again because they don't understand like what that can do to build out capacity for them if they have to go someplace, just with those relationships. Because you got all the soft guys are like building these high-end soft units everywhere around the world, but all these infantry, the logistics teams were key, like helping the Senegalese logistics hub and Dakar figure out how you actually get the parts out. Like, an SF team doesn't want to do that, but a bunch of logisticians would love to go do that for 6 months. So it was cool to be a part of that.
Yeah, it's interesting that the things you're saying, because we were briefed in 2016 what the SFABs were going to be by some general. He came down when we were in Korea, and he was telling us what we thought was not actually what. So it makes more sense, kind of hearing what you're saying is what things actually are.
Yeah, I mean, it was rolled out horrible, right? The worst campaign plan ever, right? We picked a green
first
beret.
They had the beret thing.
Yeah,
that upset more than 5 people.
Yeah, so yes, it did. It upset me. I was like, these guys are clowns. What are they doing? The patch was essentially a ripoff of our patch, the first patch. It just didn't have the lightning bolts. It was an arrowhead with a sword. They just took the lightning bolts off. I'm like, they were going to have a tab, and even General Milley, who's an SF guy who was like the brainchild of this thing, he's like, there'll be 5 of these groups and, there'll be this and there'll be 12-person teams. And it's like, what are you doing, man? Like, that's us. So I think quickly they understood like that's not our role. The messaging changed a little bit. But I mean, 2 years SFAB commander, I wore a brown beret because that's what my guys wore. And the general that I worked for was like shocked. He's like, because he had a couple SF battalion commanders in his unit that wore their green beret every day to work as SFAB guys. He goes, why are you wearing that? He goes, you're authorized. You can wear your green beret. I was like, hey, sir, like, I have one other green beret in this entire brigade. I'm going to show up in a different headgear. That's a bad green beret. Know your operational environment. Like, the guys are going to have more understanding that I'm a part of their team if I'm wearing their same uniform than me showing up every day and saying, I'm here and you could never be a part of my team. I go, so my beret is on my desk and it sits there right next to the thing that says Colonel Sullivan. So if you ever come in my office, you know who I am and where I came from. I go, but I still got my tab on my sleeve. Like, you're never going to take my beret away from me. But for these 2 years, I'm wearing the brown beret. That's what the guys wear. So
yeah, you have so little interaction as a junior enlisted guy or even an enlisted guy in a brigade, right, with command. So you'll see them at brigade runs and when they come out and give a speech. So yeah, that's a good move because how many times are your junior enlisted guys going to see you? And you got to use the 3 opportunities that you see them to relate to them a little bit, rather
absolutely.
than to be a
you don't
cool guy with their hands in their pockets. I always did think it was funny though when, for some reason, the marathon runner brigade commander would decide to run a 5-minute pace for 4 miles and the whole brigade would fall out. And you go, what is that proving to anybody? Why do that? But the real hero of the military was his flag bearer that would just keep up with him. He was the second fittest guy in the battalion, dragging this 4x8 flag just up the hill and just dying. Like, I'm not going to let the commander. So it's just 2 guys on a brigade run and then 5,000 people falling out.
Or like,
was that you?
No, we never did any brigade runs when I was a brigade commander. Because again, I was like, hey, this is a team sport. Like, we're not deploying as a brigade,
Yeah.
Actually, the way they set it up, it was kind of unique. They set it up that like the brigade, they did it on the cheap, but like the idea is that the brigade is a team as well. Like, so you could go train kind of like SF, like an infantry division commander, like you'd take your staff and you'd plug in as the advisors, right? So like I had a 12-person team that I was responsible for, like besides running the
staff?
brigade. Yeah. So like the idea was, and there was even talks early on when Ukraine first was kicking off, like maybe we should use these SFABs. Maybe we should put people in there to advise. There's this conventional set to this thing that's beyond. The SF guys already have their plan. Maybe Sullivan and his 12 dudes go in there and start advising on how you do like infantry brigade operations or division operations and how you do the log and all this other stuff. And the idea is that's a 12-person thing. Now, the problem with that is you deploy that 12-person thing, you just lost your S1, your S2, the entire 3 shop, because they're part of that 12-person team, and there's no one on the backside that is now pushing the rest of the battalions in the brigade out, the other teams. So it became this weird, when you want to talk about paperwork, I use you got to out army the army if you're an advisor, because I was like, there's nobody here to help you. You don't have an S1 on the battalion staff that just works for you, because guess what? If the battalion commander and his team leave, he's taking the S1 and his NCOIC with him because they're part of his 12-person team, because they're going to do admin advising to a brigade, like one level up, right? And which we had happen. Every one of those force packages had one of the maneuver battalions would go and set up a command and control node in Tunisia, and they would advise the Tunisians. And like those battalion commanders, it was a little bit like, they're like, hey, sir, who's in charge of my major or that company that's down in, that captain that's down in Senegal? I go, well, technically you, but you're not telling them what to do day to day because you have a day-to-day job advising somebody else. I go, so you're just going to be like checking in on them and have to trust that they're going to get the work done. Maybe they'll call you for some advice. I go, so this isn't even like SF where you would have an SF like SOTF that's just their job is to run the teams. That SOTF is now plugged into a foreign partner as well. So they got like 2 jobs. It was a little bit clunky. I mean, it was but it was all based on the Army didn't want to like build it out the same way an SF group was built out. So, I mean, an SFAB is about the size of an SF battalion in terms of people. The problem is it's a lot of senior people, right?
So I think we've completely lost the audience.
Yeah, we did. They're like, what is he talking about? He said brown beret.
Yeah, special security forces assistance brigades, right?
Yep.
And most are an advise and assist role. The problem with throwing that into Ukraine is then we are officially at war with the Russians.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. That's why they never did it.
Not instead of Charlie Wilson's warring it, which we're currently doing.
Yeah.
If you haven't read that book, that's our first foray into Afghanistan. Of how now we're just doing the same thing again in Ukraine. So check that book out. Very good. Movie's good also. I got to pee.
All right.
I got to pee. So you didn't get to do group command. Is that one that you think back on and go, I wish I would have got to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be a liar if I said no. Yeah.
Why is that? Because I talked to Lieutenant Colonel Perry Blackburn a couple weeks ago, and he goes, "Man, I really wish I would have got to command a group. That was, as an officer, is that like the pinnacle of what it is for an SF guy?"
Yeah, I think once you progress and get over the fact you're never going back to a team,
never going
back. I mean, it's probably part of the mystique, right? As a captain, like you just like you talked about, you don't get to see your brigade commander. The few times you saw your group commander, you're like, that guy, wow, he made it. Like out of all of us, that dude's there, right? So you understand like how steep that pyramid is. But having worked at like SF command as a lieutenant colonel, pre-battalion command, having it's you get a sense of like really the duty and responsibility and level of authority that those guys have. Can you hear me?
No, go ahead.
It's enticing, right? I think if you're the right kind of special forces officer, you want to have like as much authority and responsibility to like empower Green Berets to do what Green Berets do best. And the guy that's ultimately responsible for all that is the group commander, right? It's the next step is like battalion command, but like that he's the guy, and there's only, I got it, there's 7 if you count the National Guard groups, but there's 5 active duty dudes. That's it. There's only 5 of those guys ever at one time and in the active army. And there is not another O6 command. I don't care. Even, I talked about SFAT, but there's no place else in the Army except for maybe another special unit where, or maybe the Ranger Regiment, where an O6 has that kind of expertise, firepower, but responsibility, authority, and expectations, like to problem solve. I mean, you're putting a guy in a theater. You pick one of the five, that is expected to have all the solution sets that could apply to the employment of Army Special Operations in that theater. Like, he's the guy. He's the guy we're going to rely upon. He's the guy we're going to have to talk to ambassadors. He's the guy we're going to talk to foreign generals. And then he's the guy that if things go bad, we're going to say, figure this out and get us going in the right direction. That's how I saw it. Maybe it's not true, but that's the way I see it. I mean, that's how Afghanistan started. That's how Iraq started. Early on, it was SF group commanders coming up with crazy ideas on how you're going to get dudes in and then set the rest of everybody else up for success one way or the other. So I think that's kind of like the mystique of it. It's a stepping stone to other things. If you think you want to continue on in the Army, past the field grade level. But I don't know. I just like, it's, as a third group guy, having spent all that time, 6 deployments, 1st and 3rd Battalion, I just, you fall in love with your group, and just the idea that, well, one day I could be the guy that's like empowering these dudes to do the things that I got to do, was something I was hopeful for. But you also realize that because that pyramid's so steep and you're in this pool of amazing dudes, that timing has a huge piece of that. It's there of those, 4 battalion commanders, any one of them could move up, right? And that's just your peer group. And then there's guys that are your group ahead of you or your group behind you. And oh, by the way, there's also, so that's like, you're talking 12 dudes right there. And then there's 12 other guys at 5 other active duty groups who are all just as good or maybe better than you. And you don't even realize that, and for all you know, they're going to move over. And now in today's kind of like fight for group command, this dynamic that the guys that decide to go behind a fence for a little while are now eligible to come back, not only for group command, but now the battalions. That competition gets even harder. And you can get upset about it, but like the humility that you need to have, just to understand that, like, I'm okay with that, because they probably picked, you always say probably though, right? The guy that needs to be there at that time. But, it's an interesting dynamic when it comes to that level of like what's going on with the groups, but it is the pinnacle as far as I mean, I think it's even better than, because once you move up to, like, if you moved up to be the first SFC commander, oh, now you're responsible for all the groups. Like, it's even better. I mean, I've seen those guys. I've worked for them. I was an XO for one of them. Like, that's a miserable life. You're not doing the cool things anymore. You're not that guy on the ground. Group is that last kind of like tactical level with so much authority, that it's pretty cool. I mean, I think that's why most guys want it.
Yeah, because you're still in with your guys if you're a group commander. Once you get the star, you move off. You have lost. You kind of lose touch with what you're in command of.
I mean, you may go be a SIFSOC or some sort of other kind of like star command where they need to, because the theater is big enough for that. But it's still not. You're not doing the thing right. At that point, you're just enabling it.
So who's picking? Who's evaluating the lieutenant colonels to go up and become full bird? Is it a 1-star or 2-star? Because it's kind of also who you know, right? Or who knows you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it, right? In terms of, there's a process. There's, obviously the Army board. We're still like, as white soft. Well, actually, I think everybody now participates in this new BCAP process. So you got to get through the Army board process of being picked for command, which I got that. I made it that far. I was on the list as an 06 level commander, but then
Humble
it's
brag.
down to what's that?
Humble brag.
Yeah. Thank you. But I mean, that's the gate. But then from there, I mean, it's the folks, the CG at USASOC is the guy, right? He's the guy that's picking the group commanders. Ultimately, he's going to get a short list. and he's going to get an understanding of who these guys are if he doesn't know them specifically. The, first SFC commander obviously has input to that as well, that, 2-star, that's a little bit closer to it. And there is that dynamic in terms of who they know, in terms of like if it's a 7th group guy in charge that spent all his time in the 7th group, he's obviously going to know the 7th group guys that came up. The good thing about my timing, like if you were deploying, multiple people got to see you, because sometimes you were working for a 7th group siege assertive commander, or maybe if you were a 1st or 10th group guy or 5th group guy, you were working for one of those other bosses as well as a team, major or a battalion commander. So I think the world got a little bit more smaller, and obviously information helps out as well. So everyone's talking. But ultimately, it's the USASOC commander that's like narrowing that list down and going, yep, these are the guys. The Army helps him with that list, but like he's ultimately he and some of those soft generals are kind of, determining who those folks should be ideally. Some of it comes to your jobs post command. Like if you're a battalion commander and you get picked for, a specific job at USASOC or SF command, you knew you were kind of being groomed to go back as a group commander, because they want those group commanders to understand how Army SOF and SOCOM works, because you got to understand the ins and outs so you can maneuver it kind of correctly. So you knew a little bit in terms of, okay, if I get the right jobs, I know they're kind of looking at me a certain way. But yeah.
Yeah, I've said this many times. You don't know anything about how SF works until you get off the team and you go to the B team. And then you don't know anything until you go to staff.
Yep.
And then at staff, you finally realize that group doesn't know what it's doing either. But yeah, you have to go get that experience. And when you're on a team, you kind of shun the idea of staff, right? And for an officer, it's inevitable, but none of the guys on the team want to get off and go to the B team or go to battalion and be the taskings NCO. Whereas me, I would kill somebody right now to go put my uniform back on. So you don't appreciate what you have until it's gone.
Until you lose it. Yeah.
Until it's, yeah. So, I mean, I'd be head over heels back just to put my uniform on one more time. I'd do a lot of things. But you spoke earlier about the other side of the fence. What was your window of time that you could have gone to selection to go to a special missions unit?
It would have been that time post like team time. I mean, back in my day, I could have gone as early as like when I came back as a major. There was an opportunity probably, but yeah, for me, it would have been post those 20 months on the team, and then I probably even could have gone and post that first foray as the AS3 at 1st Battalion, and that's when you'd see a lot of those guys making that decision. Was that post team time? But yeah,
Was that ever an option in your mind?
What's that? I never really thought about it. I was too much in love with like the kind of SF mission set. Like maybe love's too strong a word. I really like working with foreigners. I like the idea of like that dynamic problem set. I like the idea of the ambiguity of the mission set of not really knowing exactly what you're doing every day. I mean, I wouldn't say it's completely that, regimented and they understand. It's not like Ranger Regiment on steroids, but it is a little bit more defined in terms of their mission set. And, it's a great mission set. Like I love doing direct action stuff in Afghanistan. You put me on a helicopter and go do a raid. I would have loved to continue to do that. It just wasn't the thing that I was drawn to in terms of the two different mission sets. So I really never gave it much thought that that's where I wanted to go. Nor did I ever want to like work like as a staff officer over at JSOC. Again, I always wanted to put myself in a position where I had an opportunity to work with people that were, again, taking care of the teams. So like I loved being the 3, and then I would say I loved the chief of staff job at SF Command. It was a miserable job. It was a lot of work, but like I knew like decisions that we were making at that level, if you were making them for the right reasons, were going to impact a team. They didn't know why. They still were mad at the bastards at battalion or the bastards at group, and forget the guys at SF Command. They're so out of touch. But I mean, that's kind of how I saw the way I position things is like, if you can continue to be in the right spots to impact what's going on in SFODA, like, and you're enjoying it, continue to do that. So Probably hurt me later in life because like they see 06s that didn't serve on the other side or do at least some staff time at JSOC as not being fully developed. But I wouldn't have changed it for a world because I felt like I was in the right space at the right time for folks. Even working at SWIC. I mean, my last job was the chief of staff at SWIC. As a junior colonel before battalion command, because of some folks leaving their job, I got promoted up into a job that was supposed to be a post battalion job as the 3 at SWIC. Again, it was cool because you had these problem sets you had to figure out with what you had to do to like hyper enable, whether it was the guys training the future force or the guys that were actually in the force.
Isn't it interesting? You said earlier, like, or no, we spoke about how little connection you have with somebody once they get into that higher up leadership position. And you came up as a Green Beret, with the guys, and you're interacting with the team guys all the time. A lot of times, some guys' perception of how group or the commander is doing is if they know that they can relate to them. Like those small interactions of like, oh yeah, I knew, Colonel Sullivan when he was Major Sullivan. Good dude to have a beer with. And that'll be their whole perception of how group is running or whatever group unit you are running. Things must be running fine if I could have a beer with Colonel Sullivan. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's something to that, right? Especially in our business. We're like Green Berets are the ultimate like people business in the United States Army, right? If you can't build capacity and relationships with the people you're working with, whether it's the guys on the team or the indigenous folks that you're stuck with, like you're going to fail at your job. I mean, you could be the best shot on the team, best grappler, but if you can't drink a beer and be comfortable with the guys and understand that even as like the team leader, like I can still have this relationship with folks, then you're not going to be that as successful as somebody else. Some of those guys are very successful, right? They get battalion commands, or maybe some of them become group commanders because they're that smart, they're that analytical, but like everyone's like, I would never drink a beer with that dude. So I mean, some of it's timing, some of it's just who they are. But I think it's the ultimate people business. That's why I loved it. Like, I love being on the teams, love the guys. But, the challenge, I think, too, like, and I've said this before, it's kind of something I picked up. I'm sure I stole it from somebody. But, like, when I became a major and I had, like, team leaders now, my number one advice to them would be, like, hey, man, you can be a team leader or a team mascot. Like, that's what happens with the captain. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I was like, it's a family-based environment. Everybody's everybody's friends. People are using first names. You hardly ever wear a uniform. I go, but ultimately you are the person responsible. You've been put in charge by the United States Army and Special Operations to be responsible for those other 11 dudes. They're going to be successful with or without you. They're Green Berets for the most part. There's some teams that, that doesn't work, but 99% of the time they're going to function and they're going to get it done. They could be great if you can figure out how you can be a team leader. You can present yourself in a space where that if things go in the wrong direction, you can stand up. They're going to respect you to the point that you're going to make the hard decision that they're not going to be happy about, but maybe they know that's probably a better decision for the team, or they trust you enough that they just went from good to great. I go, the team mascot can never make that decision. He just wants to be on the team, and he's happy to represent the team up and down the team hall, the company hallway. Like, and what he doesn't know is everybody's making fun of him behind his back. Everybody thinks he's just one of the guys. The E7 mafia on the team is completely, running over him and the team sergeant. It's like, I go, you don't want to be that guy. Like, and it sucks because what you'd rather do is, turn in your bars, get some rockers, and go back to the team as a junior 18 Bravo. Like, but that's not the job here. Like, so it's team leader or team mascot. And I admit it, like if people know Sullivan, like you could probably get 5 other people on the podcast. You're like, that dude was a mascot a bunch of times. Like he made some decisions that he's lucky his team didn't get in trouble, so, and that was on him. So, I mean, you're never perfect, but again, the goal is like be the team leader, but you can't separate yourself to the point that you don't understand that dynamic, right? That's what the team leader, he figures that out. And that's why he's the guy you're going to have a beer with. So I think there's something to that. I think that's a real thing. Like, because especially if it's somebody that's at the battalion or the group level, because they've proven they're making some right decisions. People are watching. There's definitely some mascots that everybody to this day are going to have a beer with. But that would be the guys that'd be like, thank God that dude never became a company, battalion, or group commander, because that would have been bad. He just did wherever the wind was blowing. That's where he went with the team. So
I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said a name, and I went, "That guy made general, huh?" And he goes, "Why?" And I go, "Fuck that dude." And he goes, and he goes, "Yeah, I agree with you." Anyway, it's like just little experiences. Mine was trivial. It was just some like little shit in, you would go less with some TDY pay, right? Back when he was in command. And I'm like, yeah, just because of that, fuck that guy.
Yeah. I had a battalion commander I worked for, is a legend, a guy named Chris Riga. He would say you could decide if you heard, there's two things you could hear about a Green Beret. He goes, if you heard that dude's good shit, he goes, that dude is a phenomenal Green Beret. He goes, I was like, well, what do you hear if it's not? He goes, it's fuck that dude.
Fuck that dude.
Yeah. He goes, you fall into one of those two categories. He goes, you want to be good in the good shit category. And I was like, all right, noted. Thanks, boss.
Yeah, it's really, God, the most important thing, right? And you don't realize it till you're out and now is what the guys that were on the team with you or in the company with you say about you after the fact, much farther after the fact. If you get recommended for stuff or your name comes up, and it takes years and years for all that shit to happen to know, okay, yeah, I made some good friends and some good impressions. Even with this, I'll stir up people I haven't talked to in years. And the best one, the best one was a friend of mine from the Q course. We went through the course together, killed it. And I was down in Western North Carolina working, and I come around the corner. I'm checking the parking lot for some people, whatever. And I'm like, I know that guy. I fucking park my ATV, run up and just fucking pick him up. And I was like, Nick? He's like, you got big. I was like, yeah, it's kind of my thing. But we start talking, and he grabs his, I don't know if it was junior or senior Charlie, and he points at me, and this is unprompted. And he goes, this motherfucker's the best Charlie I ever worked with. And I'm like, gonna make me cry here in front of a bunch of Green Berets that are in uniform. But I was like, that was the best feeling in the world, for somebody to say something nice about me. That I hadn't seen him in 10 years to that point. We hadn't met face to face in 10 years. And that's what it's all about. It's like running into the guys and they say good things about you instead of, fuck that guy.
Yeah. No, I got a note from when I was a battalion commander. I just got it like a couple months ago from one of the guys that was one of my team sergeants. Handwritten note. And it's like, you're one of the greatest officers I worked for. I look at that every day just to remind me, like, okay, I had an impact. Like, that's what it was all about. Like, so
yeah,
because it's a guy that I like absolutely respect. Right, the guy was, was a legend, and it's just like, for him to say that about me, I guess I did something right. At least I see it. I'm sure there's other guys out there like Sullivan. Fuck that guy. You can't make everybody happy.
Same thing when I got medically retired, and I got I guess you call it a retirement award, right? Or retirement, whatever. And I opened it up, and it says an RCOM. It was downgraded MSM. So I threw it in the garbage, and I took this right in the rain new sheet that they had stuck in there. And could only be from one of two people that sat, one behind me, one in front of me. It was either Sergeant First Class Simpson or Master Sergeant Wilson, right? And it was just, basically saying, we miss you around here and we hope the best for you. And I kept that, and I was pissed about that. I was like, it's just, why did you downgrade it? And when I called back, the Master Sergeant who is now in charge goes, it's because you weren't an E7. And I said, well, Master Sergeant, I am an E7. And he goes, oh, that sucks. And he hung up. So, but I kept the right in the rain note, and I have it in my truck, absolutely. And I look at it all the time. Yeah. And that means more to me than, that's like this thing up here, it's like it's on the level of this plaque, right? That little sheet of paper. That's what it's all about. Getting supported and being supported by the Green Berets and things like that. But now you're in a different role, right? So Chief of Staff of Team Red, White, and Blue sounds pretty prestigious. What is that all about?
It is. It's about to get even more prestigious. The board voted.
When you run across the country?
No, our executive director is, we're doing a left seat, right seat. I'm going to replace him. So I'm actually in the process of becoming the incoming executive director. So the guy running the whole thing. But yeah, Team Red, White, and Blue. The guy I'm just talking about, Mike Irwin, founder and current executive director. He and I served in 1st Battalion, 3rd Special Forces Group back when I was the commander of Charlie Company. He was the Battalion S2, and we did that big operation. He was the Battalion S2 and was a part of that whole planning and our brilliant ConOps scheme to get away from having to do 75 slide ConOps. But he left 3rd Group and as a major ended up at the University of Michigan to get his master's in psychology because he was going to go back to West Point and teach like psychology up there. And while he was there, he's like, I really want to do something for like the veteran force that's transitioning out of the military. We should do something for all these guys that are coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan. This is like 2009. So in 2010, he came up with this idea, Team Red, White, and Blue will develop an organization that's built around giving veterans a sense of community, social connection, and purpose tied to physical fitness. Like keep them moving. Like just because you're out, you shouldn't stop working out, running, whatever. And initially it was like for the wounded guy, like let's focus on wounded warriors. Quickly determined like, hey, this is impact, like the people that are helping and are a part of this like community that's building up are getting more out of it than just the like, so we'll expand this thing for all veterans very quickly. He called me because the way he got it kind of off the ground quick is he's like, all the high functioning folks I know and have worked with, whether they were my fellow West Point graduates or like these operators in 3rd Special Forces Group, I'm going to call all my friends and say, you're starting at, a group where you live. So I was in Fayetteville. That was the time when I was at SWIC getting kind of like stuck in the S3 job. And he's like, hey, I need you to stand up the local chapter. It wasn't called a chapter then, but the local group. It's Team Red, White, and Blue. I'm sending you a bunch of red t-shirts. Figure it out. I was like, well, what is it? Like, he's like, you guys did a running event. Like, he's like, is it a running club? He goes, sure. If it's a running club there, it's a running club. Like, you just need to get veterans, active duty, community people, civilians all together and just, do physical activity together and like they'll work through their problems. It's going to be great. Trust me, this thing's going to work out. We're going to figure this out. So that was the start of it. And I just kind of got things off the ground here. I got really busy, became a battalion commander, and was like handed it off to another guy. I was like, I don't have time I'll be a member, but I don't have time to like do this stuff and set up the events. So I stayed actively involved throughout the rest of my career. And then when it came time to like transition out, Mike calls me again and he's like, what are you doing? What's your plan for retirement? I was like, I don't know, consulting, like most 06 colonels, like I'll use my, title and whatnot, and somebody will pay me to come in and say, this is screwed up, fix this. And I was like, and I had another friend that had worked at the Cleveland Browns. I'm like, I might do some consulting with professional sports. That sounds cool. It's teams. Like, I like team stuff. He's like, well, I got a team for you. Like, I'm going to hire you. Like, you're going to come in to be work for us at Team Red, White, and Blue. So that's kind of how the transition, and it was just like the easy button, right? Because I just went from wearing a uniform to wearing a red t-shirt every day or whatever color I'm wearing with the eagle on it. I'm still working out every day, forces me to stay in shape, and I get to have like kind of a service oriented kind of purpose in my life. So it made transition really easy. Like, I did the skills bridge with Team RWB as the oldest intern on the planet. And then, 3 months later, they hired me as the chief of staff. And there was a plan all along for Mike to say, hey, look, this is an opportunity for you to see what's going on. I think in about 2 years, I'm going to move on to some other things, but I want to make sure I have the right guy that has passion for the mission, understands the history, but has an understanding like what it's all about to run a nonprofit. So all of last year was kind of that year of us kind of figuring that out. And then he presented to the board like, hey, end of the next year, I'm going to move on our 15-year anniversary in October. I think we should hire in-house and you guys can vote if Sullivan's the guy. So that it went well. And so right now he's going to be the outgoing and I'm the incoming executive director. But the organization has evolved. It's kind of cool because the mission is still kind of like communities, purpose, but the vision shifted 2017, 18 to really rely less on transition and more this idea that your health and wellness is kind of tied to staying connected, having a purpose, and maintaining some level of fitness. So the vision now is to like form the veteran community's leading health and wellness community. And again, the formula hasn't changed. 20% of our members, 300,000 plus now across the nation are civilians. A lot of them are like family members, but a lot are just locals that want to like get to know veterans or get to know the active duty force. You know, here in Fayetteville, North Carolina, there's a bunch of people that are Team RWB that work at the county, had no touch to the military, but felt like they wanted to get to know these folks and be a part of what was going on. So we run with, folks every Tuesday and Thursday. They'll show up tonight when I go tonight to the Tuesday night run. But it's relying now kind of into focusing on holistic health and wellness. I mean, I'm trying to bring in the lessons learned of like Thor 3 and all that stuff that, hey, it's not just physical fitness, it's sleep, it's hydration, it's diet, and the way we kind of provide that programming now is we have an app. We do like physical fitness and like wellness challenges within the app. You gamify it. People like it, if they get a little badge on their profile at the end of it. But it forces people to learn about those things, like why sleep is probably the number one thing, why you should move every day, even if you're just walking, and we have activity groups for everything. I assume you'd rather not run and you'd probably allow to lift weights. There's groups that, do functional fitness. There's guys that like the mountain bike. There's guys that like to do, holistic wellness or whatever we call it, which is yoga, and there's the running group, which is probably the biggest group of folks because that's kind of how it all got started. But there's a little bit of everything for everybody in the app, and it has a further reach now because there's not chapters everywhere across the country. We still think in-person engagement's the primary mode, and we try to drive people to the events that they can find in-app that are happening in person. But again, it's that encouragement that, hey, like the process doesn't stop. Like you were given so many tools in the military to be resilient, to understand like how to take care of yourself. Sure, somebody was telling you to do it, at 6:30 to face right and go for a run. But like that's not, that didn't like our big thing is that didn't damage you. It didn't break you. You're not a victim. If anything, you're the opposite of that. Take ownership of it. And let's kind of set a standard for not only like ourselves as veterans, but America, that like we shouldn't be sitting on couches, drinking a bunch of, sodas, eating the wrong foods, getting fat, diabetic, and obese. Like we as veterans should be leading this country out of like the health and wellness crisis that we're currently in. So that's kind of like the new push
absolutely.
for RWB. Yeah.
There's the reason the military does it first thing in the morning. It is the introduction to the day, to how you meet people, to how you interact, how you function, your well-being, your mental health, your physical health, everything is based on, do you get up and fucking exercise in the morning? I mean, after you said I'm into strength, I am very strong, but after this, I'm going to go do my 1,000 meters in the pool and my sprints on the treadmill after that, because I have this little tag on my Instagram, right? It's at the bottom. If you click more, it says fittest Green Beret. I know I'm not the fittest Green Beret, but I am I train like it. I train like it in my mind that I'm going to be, because when I was in the hallway, I was like, I can't be on a team, so I'm going to be strong. And so I'm out, and, I finally put down the alcohol 51 weeks ago. And,
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I've gone into the gym, and I'm very strong, and I'm very fit, and I try and embody what people think a Green Beret should be. I'm not a guy you can have a beer with anymore, but I'll have a Sprite or something else like that. But I hope people would say I'd have a beer with that guy. It's just not 30, not 35 of them. But it's interesting, right? Guys get out and they go, I don't need to do that anymore. I don't need to do PT anymore. When no, you need to do it more. It'll help your transition. It'll
no, don't live the label. Like, so great. Like the Army damaged you, and now the government's going to pay you for it. You got a disability rating. maybe it's 100%. That's awesome that we're taking care of you. You're going to feel better every single day if you're strong, you're moving. Like if you got arthritis, guess what? If the muscles around that joint are stronger, you're going to feel better. Trust me, I know. Like, I'm getting to an age that things start to hurt constantly all the time, but I know when I go for a run, I go to the gym, I feel better physically and mentally, right? So, and there's science behind it too. So it's just, we continue to push that narrative. Like, and oh, by the way, the VA is not going to swoop in like you're doing some sort of like insurance fraud and be like, how this guy's running like ultra marathons? He's got 100% disability rating. No, he's continuing. It's a rating. He's not 100% disabled. Like they're two different things, my man.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, like he should continue to do that because him going on these long runs or lifting and getting in the pool is keeping him out of the VA with the people that actually have acute like diseases that need to be taken care of, instead of him showing up fat and saying, hey, where's my Ozempic or my shot that's going to like solve these things for me? Like, no, like you still have a responsibility to like work every day. Like that's just the way life is. It's not just for veterans, it's everybody, but like,
Oh yeah. And I tell people, you don't do what I do right away. You can't do it. You'll quit because it sucks. Right.
yeah,
I got to the point where it sucked and now I've pulled back, because you're right. I feel better. My hip feels better. My neck feels better. Some of my issues have gone away, and some of the pain and stuff like that. It's all held together, but it's a lot of work keeping it all together. You got to eat
yeah,
and sleep and stay hydrated, and not drink, and eat plenty of food, and listen to health. And then you listen to health podcasts, right? If you stop listening to conspiracy theory podcasts and listen to health podcasts, you'll probably get healthier because you're listening to that shit
yeah,
over and over again.
yeah.
That's one thing.
That's exactly what we try to do. Like we have an application. It has a social media field. There's no algorithm, so you only get to see what you follow. We're like, just get in there for 5 minutes to get smart about something daily. Or like, if you're happy about something you did, post that picture so people can give you some likes if that's what motivates you. But like, we pulled everybody. Like, we was like everybody was really upset a few months back. We shut down all our Facebook groups, and we're like, it's unhealthy. Like, we have a place where you can go to get your information. You don't have to stay there long, and you can. It's healthier in terms of like the standards for the community is this is the stuff you're talking about, health and wellness. Like, and that doesn't include your opinion on who's in office, your opinion about whatever, thing. Like, do that someplace else. So that's the way we see things in terms of like, you got to own it. It's going to take some work, but stay positive about it. And ideally, like, we say it's the easiest way to like do it is to surround yourself with people that if you're not going to hold yourself accountable, they're going to be like, hey, Sully, are you coming to the run tonight? You were here last week. Like, get back out here. Let's keep going. Like, they'll check in on you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's because you want that. I mean, it gives you that team environment, that you were used to while you're in the service. Doesn't always like work out best for you because sometimes those guys can convince you to do dumb things like, hey, let's go run 100 miles or let's do this stupid like Spartan race or something. But
Jamie Tilka, he was at SWIC. I don't know if you were there at the same time. He was a warrant officer but he he said on the podcast, he said, you're the sum of the 5 people you hang out with the most. Well, when I worked construction back when I was a kid before the market collapsed and shit, you hung out with alcoholics because they would leave the job site and then everybody would go to the bar. So all you did was hang out at the bar. And then after that was over, I worked in a bar. So all you did was hang out with them. But when you get in the military, you're hanging out with the guys in your team, and you start living that lifestyle. And it's true. If you don't like what you're doing now and you're unhealthy and you want to make a change, just go to the CrossFit gym and start hanging around with those people. Or they're the most accepting group of all of the sports out there. It's like, yeah, come on in. I don't care what level you're at, what your fitness level is. You can work into this. Or, go to the gym, hang out at the YMCA, start talking with the older folks there that are just there to push their walker around the track, right? Just start hanging out with different people and you'll find a different level of, wanting to get healthier. You see that with our RWB then?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's why we've grown past just being like a running group because you want to meet people where they're at and what they're interested in, and then give them that opportunity to, you know, either hold other people accountable. You know, it gives you a sense of purpose, right? In terms of like you're doing something positive, not only for yourself, but again, for those guys that you want to be around. It's, yeah, I think it's really, and it's a positive environment in terms of like our messaging. Cause I'm with you. Like there's so many groups out there. It makes you a lot of money, you know, to say that all veterans are victims. All of us have operator syndrome because we're special operators. We can't help it. We're damaged goods, operator syndrome. Give me a bunch of money so I can take care of this guy. And those people that put themselves in those environments and listen to the negative, broken, unfixable, wounded for life. Like, no, man, like you would have never been able to get away with that when you were in. Like,
No,
like there would have been people that would have pulled you away from that, you know, if they're the right people. Like, get out of that negative environment. So, um, yeah,
it's
we
not so
really
easy
hope
though.
that people
Sometimes
can
it's not
find
that
that.
easy to just do
No,
that though.
no, it's not.
Um,
And it's uncomfortable, right? It's kind of the uncomfortable truth sometimes, but the, you got to stay consistent with it though, and hope that, you know, and it's not always going to work. Like some folks they're not going to want to listen to it, you know, and it's going to take a different angle or tack to get them where they need to be. But again, we hope we're there to be that kind of positive change of force, you know, for folks. And again,
no,
people, you know, again, we get blamed. Team RWB are a bunch of crazy runners that do. It's not for everybody. It's too hard. I'm just like, hey, dig into it a little bit more. Check out the app, see who we are. I think there's something for everybody. And again, there's a lot more to it than just the physical activity. Getting together and just having some people to talk to or, you know, share experience with is pretty critical once you kind of leave such a insulated environment, which the service is. I mean, it's phenomenal the support you get. You know, for the most part, I know some people have bad experiences, but it's
yeah,
an environment that is truly gives you some grit, gives you some opportunities, forces you each day to do the things that's right for yourself. You know, but
people have this misconception that they won't be accepted because they're not any good at fitness, right? They can't go up to somebody in the gym and ask for help or things like that. But
yeah,
I mean, and people won't talk to me in the gym. But if they were to just come over and ask me anything, I'll answer them. I'll show them how to do it. I'll show them the technique. I'll show them this. I'll give them some advice. I'm not going to train you, but I'll give you pointers. Where people have in their mind, they
yeah,
put these people out there away from arm's length where they can't talk to them and they can't get to know them and they segregate it. And that's not really the case in the fitness community. Everybody's pretty welcoming. And the people that aren't, that give everybody else a bad name. It's too
yeah,
bad.
yeah.
Well, um, running across country with 12 people? What's up with that? Why? Why do that? That sounds horrible.
I think even the people that are doing it are pretty excited about it.
I
But
bet they
I'll
are.
tell you
I
more
bet
about
they
it.
are.
Yeah.
That's
So RWB, for 10 years, there's a little break because of COVID. Um, they ran a flag. And it's kind of always been a thing that like, hey, go run with a flag. Even since the start, there's something special about it. Um, and I encourage everyone to do it just locally. Like if you run down the street with a flag, you're going to get at least 3 people honking their horn and like giving you a thumbs up. It doesn't matter their politics or whatever. I would say 99% of Americans love America and they love the flag. So when they see someone out there representing it, you're going to get some support. So with that in mind, over 10 years ago, they're like, hey, what if, I think it was, I forget if it was the World Games. It was something was going on. They're like, hey, in conjunction, what if we get a bunch of veterans, move a flag from one part of America to another part, like across the country. We'll do it in like 60 days. We'll ride it on bikes. We'll walk it. We'll jog it just during the day from point A to point B. It was a great event. Got a lot of the members involved, gave them an opportunity to kind of be a part of this kind of thing bigger than themselves or bigger than the group that they were at locally. And it was a really incredible event that brought different communities together and an awareness to like what Team RWB is doing for the organization. It was kind of a big advertisement for us and to get people involved at the same time. Um, Last year we did it, and it's harder to get people out. People weren't as interested. Um, and we're like, and it was a heavy lift for the organization. We're just like, do we keep doing this? Do we change it? So we were thinking about that at that time. At the same time, this Navy officer, active duty guy, reaches out to us like it'd be now, he started about a year ago, but so about 16 months ago, and said, hey, I'm going to try to break the transcon record, single person running across America. I want to raise $1 million for Team RWB while I'm doing that. And we're like, well, that's awesome. Like, cool. We'll provide you support with social media. We'll help set up the website and promote you. And this guy had a huge social media following. His name's Paul Johnson. And he was kind of a genius at how to kind of like work both angles in terms of like his influencer kind of side as a runner, an ultra runner. And just the idea of like, I'm doing this for this veteran organization that I think is great. And, you know, they use physical activity and community and all this stuff. So he could hit all the talking points. Ran across America, did not break the record, but he raised $600,000 for us doing it. And at the end, like I was there at the final leg, the last like 9 miles coming into Manhattan into Times Square. And it was crazy. Like he had built such a buzz. It was like Forrest Gump. Like we had hundreds of people. We had people coming out of apartment buildings because we got the New York City Police Department just based on the fact that we were veterans and they were runners and they were RWB members. We explained to them like, hey, this is what's happening. It would be great if you guys could control this and like give him an escort so he doesn't get hit by a car before he gets to Times Square. He just ran across America. They're like, we'll do you one better. We'll shut down the main artery from the George Washington Bridge to Times Square. And it turned into this. It was amazing. Like I look back at me one point and I couldn't see the end of the people that were like coming out of their buildings and like, what's going on? And people were like, this guy just ran across America. And everyone was just like, it was crazy. It was an amazing event. So we're like, so our founder, Mike Irwin's like, man, I think this is the time. He goes, I've always wanted to take something like that that's epic, take the Old Glory relay, which was the flag, and what if we set a record with a certain number of veterans, like just doing it in a crazy amount of time, like moving a flag from the East Coast to the West Coast. So we're like, I don't know, let's take a look at it. So myself and the deputy director were kind of put in charge of like, let's plan this thing out and figure out what we would do. Obviously I was drawn to the number 12. I was like, I think it's 12 veterans. That's all we're going to use is 12. Well, and we're setting the record. So we get to kind of set the parameters, but we thought, hey, if you pick like 50 or 100, someone could probably come behind us, find 100 really fast runners and just like take the record really easy. So we're like, we need to make it challenging enough that it almost seems impossible. But we can pull it off. 12 made sense because we could take a 24-hour day, break it up to 8-hour segments and put 4 runners on like a sub team for their 8 hours. And then they would get 16 hours to leap ahead to a hotel, sleep, get their nutrition in, recover, do all the things. And then 16 hours later, they're back at the next spot to take the flag from the team that had just run for 8 hours and go. The runners get to set within their kind of team. They're all similar capabilities. It's 10 male veterans, 2 female veterans. But what we said is there's no minimum amount of mileage you guys have to run, individual runner, during your 8 hours. But ideally, you guys break it up as best to get as much mileage as possible, right? Because the goal is we average a 7:30 to 8-minute mile pace for the entire 3,000 miles across America. That puts us at about a 16, 17-day finish. If it's a little bit more, it's then 18. But so they're like, okay. And what we just did a rehearsal in Arkansas this last week where we put every team out for 8 hours. And the average was like 30 to 45 minutes is the sweet spot for anybody to be on the flag. Some people that are faster ran a little bit further on their team than the slower folks, but they averaged actually more like a 7-minute mile pace over the 8 hours. Now, granted, it was a one-day event. Yeah. We didn't have to run through the Rockies. There was some hills, but so we think we're in a good spot with the runners, with the people we picked. And we were honest up front too. Like when we started selecting these folks, because we had hundreds of people put in their name in the hat to be a part of this thing. And we said, hey, we might not pick the best runners. And there's some folks that we passed on that were phenomenal runners, but we just had a sense of day 6 in their RV with their team of 4 people. Are they going to be the person that everybody just wants to leave on the side of the road? And I was able to lean into like some soft experience of like that guy on the team that's not going to make it through the rotation.
You
Like we got
boarded
to,
civilians. Oh my
yeah.
God.
So we got to figure out like, how can we take 12 people who never met themselves before, get them together, and they're going to work together towards this common goal without like egos about like, hey, I'm running 6:30s every day and you're running an 8. Like you're going to have to get over that. Like the average is the average and it's a team event. So we've put it together. Nonprofit, so we're getting a ton of sponsors to kind of like fund this thing. For us, obviously it's going to be a big messaging like about Team RWB, about resiliency, about the power of veterans. Like veterans do epic stuff. They're not broken, they're not victims. These guys are going to run, and those two gals are going to run a flag for constantly 3,000 miles as fast as possible. Like this is what veterans do when they get out of the service. Is kind of our message with it. And you can be a part of that if you're part of Team RWB, right? That's where we're going with it. We're also trying to raise money, right? So this is, rather than doing a gala or a ball, we're Team RWB. We're going to do something epic and then ask you for your money, So um, we're hoping to raise $1 million, just like Paul Johnson's goal was. If we hit it, great, But the messaging side of this will be good. We have a company called Veteran Made, a veteran-owned documentary. They're going to do a documentary on it. They want to follow us, and that should be interesting. But starts on the 2nd of May on the deck of the USS Midway in the bay right there in San Diego. If they can get the right JAG permissions, the SEALs from Coronado are going to bring a flag that was deployed across the bay on a Zodiac and run up the gangway, and we'll hook it onto the pole, and then we'll send the runners off the deck. We're going to go basically through Arizona, New Mexico, hit Dallas, come up through Arkansas. We're hitting a spot that we work with. It's a veteran-owned place called the University of Health and Performance. I encourage you to check it out. I call it the health and fitness kind of trade school for veterans. Amazing guy, Matt Hesse, his vision to like, he bought 500 acres of cattle farm, turned it into this premier place where you can go get your certified personal training certificate after an in-person comprehensive 3-week school. You can use your GI Bill to go there. We provide some scholarship opportunities to go there to pay for it. They're also expanding to do like nutrition and other things at this school. It's a phenomenal concept, and we've been working with him for a year. So based on his support, we're going to run right through the campus there with the flag. Then we're going to hit Nashville, kind of cut over the Appalachians into the Shenandoah Valley and straight into DC. And we're going to end at the future home of the GWAT Memorial, which is right off on the mall, right off from the Lincoln Memorial, kind of just adjacent to the Vietnam Memorial where it's going to be at. So it's a little opportunity for us to actually kind of bring awareness to another great thing for veterans, which is this, war memorial that's being built for all of us that fought in the last 20 years. So ideally we finish on the 17th of May, which is Armed Forces Day, and it'll be one for the record books.
I mean, that sounds amazing, right? I mean, when I say that sounds like it sucks,
Yeah.
the running part, I just doing that,
Yeah.
that sounds pretty intensive,
Yeah.
right?
The runners will do, based on their speed, anywhere from like 14 to 18 miles a day.
Okay.
Like for
And then we're 20, or we're 24/7.
24/7. Like, and unless it's like some sort of like lightning storm, take the flag down and like fold it and put it in a backpack. It's flying off of like a regular flagpole that you can buy, 3x5 flag. So that drag of the wind, the rain, it's going to be, we're going to experience some stuff. And then we have like backside supports another like 12 to 15 people. We're running just like an operation. We got 2 guys that are going to be recon. They've already drove the road once. They'll tell us like, hey, this highway is now under construction. You're going to have to shift. So they'll be out about like 6 to 12 hours doing the forward recon. Luckily we got donors from hotels and some other sponsors that we can get, cheap hotels. We're going to support, the runners will actually have RVs for during the day when they're moving, like a 25-foot RV. So when they get off the road, they can heat up their food. They can stretch out. We got some incredible partners, this like innovative, like new, like it's hard to explain, but Shift Wave is one of our in-kind sponsors. They're working with all the groups. to provide these chairs that you lay in, and it gives you this intense experience like massage chair, but it's not a massage chair. It's hard to explain, but it essentially kind of reset your vagus nerve and your nervous system as well as push out toxins.
One of those
Yeah. So,
mats. Yeah.
well, it's one of those zero gravity chairs. So you sit in that,
Okay.
you put on a blindfold, and it takes you through like breathing as this thing just beats the hell out of you. It's like somebody said it's like 1,000 Theraguns on you at the same time. But so we're using kind of some of these innovative techniques to try to like, give guys recovery, have some portable ice baths. We'll have a physical therapist with us. We have a surgeon who's taking everybody's blood markers, and he's going to be tracking everybody through their wearables. Fitbit is our wearable for the event. They're sponsoring us. And so we're trying to use all the stuff to provide the athletes kind of a sense of where they're at. Like, hey, maybe you're going to have to take it a little bit easy tomorrow. Your sleep sucked. This is going on. He's going to be checking blood levels throughout. Great guy. He enlisted in the Ranger Regiment as a medic. Everyone that we've run into that knew him is like, that dude was, that private that, is always getting himself in trouble, a little bit of a loudmouth. Gets out of the Ranger Regiment, gets out of the Army, goes to medical school, and he's like this high-end like surgeon now. And when he saw us put out a all call for like medical support, he's like, I can do my practice anywhere. I'm certified in all 50 states. So yeah. So we'll have Doc Vol will be like in his RV ready to, as he describes it, he's that doctor in Cannonball Run that's going to be injecting the dudes with stuff to get them across. And we're like, hey Doc, we're not injecting anybody with anything unless it's like they need
What
it.
day is the takeoff? What's the start point for this one?
The 2nd of May. So
2nd of May.
2nd of May, we're at 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock is like the little ceremony on the deck of the Midway. So we'll be right up there. And then we tear off out of town heading east. So
that's a hell of a project to undertake there. So what you got a plan for what you think could go wrong too, or something will come up. Hopefully you guys got everything.
Like inevitably RVs are going to break down, right? So the doc will have the 4th RV to be the one that swaps out. We got a former F-16 mechanic, Air Force guy who has his own business doing roadside recovery here in North Carolina. He's like, I can take 3 weeks off and be the guy that like pulls all your vehicles back together when they break down. Because we're going to have, inevitably have a vehicle breakdown or like, something's going to go wrong. Because they've done it, RWB's done this before. They've run through the Midwest and the Southwest. Like we'll probably have somebody forward of the runner on a bike, so you can get all the rattlesnakes off the road in New Mexico and Arizona, and West Texas. Like that's a real thing. You don't want to be running with a flag and all of a sudden a 6-foot rattlesnake is like something you have to get past. So,
come on, they'll be fine.
So I mean, there's those kind of things. I mean, inevitably the weather's not going to be something we can totally predict. It's a little late in the year to be doing a transcon, especially running through the South. We're kind of doing it based on the elevation levels, but right now we're trying to work through because the teams are all like, hey, who gets what 8-hour shift? Because one team's going to get like a little bit of daylight at the end of the day, and then they're running at night. The next team's going to get a little bit of nighttime in early morning, and then like a couple hours during the day. And the third team gets all daylight, right? Which some people would say, well, that's the shift I want to be on so I can keep my normal sleep rhythm. The problem with that is the all daylight team is going to get the heat of the day, right? So like the debate is right now is do you put your best running team at night or like where they can like have the best conditions to not be smoked by the heat, or do you put them because they're the workhorses in the middle of the day and everybody else, the average of the time is not there. We're not going to lose as much. So there's some science there we're trying to figure out because no one's ever really done this before. The nearest running thing to it is a thing called the Speed Project, where they go from LA to Las Vegas. It's like 300 miles, and you get to pick your route, and it's like a 6-person team, I think maybe. It's a relay, and it's the same thing. You're on as fast as you think you can do it. We're just doing this, to an extreme level with it being 3,000 miles.
If you're going to do anything, do it to a ridiculous level that is worthy of talking about in the end, right? It's the same, if I'm going to do anything hard, well, I better go be a Green Beret and make it something that things people will remember. Well, I mean, that sounds really good. I would help you out on that, but I'm not very good at running.
Yeah. I
And
wish I was still
but
fast. I'm not fast enough to be on the team where I would
what
be.
I would say though is, the people during the day are you got to put the people that hold their hydration the best during the
Yeah.
day, because
Yeah.
I know myself,
Yeah.
when we would go on rucks, I would just lose all. If that sun was out, I would just soak through my uniform and just terrible. So that's,
That's the
yeah,
key science, right? We have a running coach, Zach Bitter, who said, "Hey, what you guys got to do is tell everybody to set for an hour-long run, weigh themselves beforehand. You know, if they have to wear some extra clothing that is going to put some heat on them, like do that, and then weigh themselves after. And the ones that lost the least amount of water weight are the ones you need to have on during the day.
yeah.
So yeah,
That's what it's gonna be like in the hot temperatures. Well, fuck that. Sounds like you got a lot going on. I'm glad to hear that your transition was smooth. But that comes from, years of practice
yeah,
transitioning into different units and things like that.
yeah.
Looking back on it all, are you amazed at how fast it went by to get to this point now? Just from, because it had to
Yeah.
be, you were at war the entire time you got your Green Beret, right? It's just like one fire to the
Yeah.
next.
Yeah. Yeah. From the start, the I mean, it all went fast. I mean, I enjoyed my time as a field artillery guy. I mean, you know, one of the poorest armies at that time, the Clinton years. I mean, people talk about the cuts that are coming. Look at what happened during that time. It's, we're not even close to being where we're at governmentally with cuts, but we were training all the time, because we're the Krasnovians, the Russians, we're going to go to World War III and fight this conventional war. I love doing that. It was a good time. It sucked, but we would go. I was at Fort Lewis. We'd go to Yakima for 90 days to go shoot and move around. It was awesome. The But yeah, it's amazing to think how fast it flew by and where I'm at now. When I kind of sit back and look at it, where like our youngest, who are twins, a boy and a girl, are now captains in the Army, and it's just like, well, how the heck did that happen? Like I remember going to high school soccer games and track meets, or coaching them in grade school and basketball. Like that just seems like that was yesterday. Now they're both married and doing their own thing in the military. I'm an Army dad now. So,
Goes by way too fast. What's it like having do the kids put any extra pressure on themselves knowing that their dad was an SF colonel, did all these cool things?
yeah, I think so to an extent. Like they both decided to. I was a 2-year ROTC guy. The furthest thing away from being a West Pointer, maybe besides like going green to gold. And they both decided they wanted to go to West Point, which I always joked with them. I was like, "It's good public school. I don't have to pay for it. You guys go to West Point." So they both go to West Point. They both played sports there. My son ran the 800-meter in track. My daughter played rugby. Um, and they had a blast there. My daughter's an engineer, and my son's an infantry officer. And with my daughter, oftentimes, especially when she first got to her like time as outside of West Point, or and sometimes at West Point, she would call and ask for advice, and she goes, "I want Dad to answer this question, not Colonel Sullivan. Can I talk to Dad?" She goes, she goes, "I know what the Army answer is going to be. I don't need you to like, I want like your opinion as a father, like, and speak to me as if I know what I'm talking about as a second lieutenant." I was like, okay, that's impossible, but let's go with this conversation, you know? So it was, and actually the two of them would say they didn't really they realized like they lived in an Army town, but they were surrounded by it since they were babies. I was in special forces. Um, and they were surrounded by that community here in Fayetteville, because most of our time was here in, they would call Fayetteville their hometown. So they said at West Point is when they would like kind of mention to people like who I was. They're like, "Your dad's a special forces colonel? Like, that's pretty amazing." They're like, "He's just my dad." Like, they didn't,
Yeah.
you know, which was funny also with my daughter, her freshman year. I go to meet her math teacher. It's like parents' weekend. And I come in civilian clothes. I was at the War College. We drove up there. My wife was like late because she was teaching, and she's a math teacher. Go in. I'm meeting my daughter's math. I'm in civilian clothes. She's like, "Samantha's great. I love her. All this stuff." And she is a major. She goes, "What do you do, by the way? Like, Samantha's never told me what you do. And I started laughing. I was like, well, I'm a student at the Army War College. I'm a Special Forces colonel. And I just came out of third group and I'm going to Lebanon next. And she's like, she kind of like stiffens up. I was like, relax, stop. And she's like, Samantha, you never told me your dad was like a colonel in the Army. And she goes like, why does that matter? Like, it doesn't matter that my dad's a colonel in the Army, because she just wanted to be her own person. At which point she goes, well, where's your wife? I go, oh, she had to teach. She's running late. She's doing substitute teaching in Pennsylvania. She goes, well, what does she teach? I go, she's a math teacher. And she's like, your mom's, I go, she was her high school math teacher. I go, she's actually upset she's missing getting to talk to you about this stuff. And she goes, she never told me that. At which point her twin brother walks in from across the hall from his math class. And he's standing there kind of just laughing and smiling. And she's like, can I help you, cadet? She goes, oh, I'm just here because that's my dad and that's my sister. She goes, excuse me? She goes, yeah, that's my twin sister. And she's like, Samantha, like, you have a twin brother at West Point I don't know about either? She's like, I wanted you just to accept me for who I was. So that's kind of how, like, her way of kind of dealing with things. Jackson would tell people like, yeah, my dad's a Special Forces colonel. Interesting enough, him, that you fast forward, I'm doing my last job as the chief of staff at SWCC. He keeps saying I'm going to go put in my packet and put it in my packet. And I'm like, I don't know if he wants to be a Green Beret. Like, is he just doing this because of me? And sure enough, he, it was like stalling. And I was like, what's going on? So I call him. I was like, hey, dude, you got like a week left and your group's up. Like, they're moving on to the next group of captains. I go, so you need to give me a call so we can have a talk about this, because it seems like you're dragging your heels on this packet. So he called me. I was like, hey, dude, here's the scenario. I'm like, 8 years from now, you're going to be home for Christmas. We're going to be drinking beers. You're going to look at me and say, I could have gone SF, but I couldn't get my packet in on time. I go, at that point, I'm going to say, there's the front door, leave my house and never come back. And he goes, you want me to be an SF guy that bad? I go, no, I want you to be an adult that bad.
Yeah.
I go, I want you to own this decision. I go, because if you just want to be an infantry officer, that's great. Be the best infantry officer you can be. I go, I don't want you to be something because you think I want you to be it. And I don't want you to be one of those guys that now has an excuse on why you couldn't be me. I go, because I'm not going to accept it, because I know you could have got your packet in on time. I go, so you got 24 hours, figure it out. I was like, they had done an exchange with the Indian Army. He was up in the 11th Airborne in Alaska at the time. And I was like, did you enjoy that? He's like, I did not enjoy training foreigners. He goes, I loved traveling. He goes, but that was miserable. Like, trying to get them to do the things they need to do. I go, then you do not want to be a Green Beret. That's your job, dude. He goes, yeah, but you were at war in Afghanistan. I was like, that's not what we do. Like, our job is to do that and do it better than what you were doing as like an infantry platoon leader. He's like, yeah, I don't think I want to do that. I was like, well, think about it for 24 hours and then call me back. He called back. He's like, Dad, I'm deciding right now. I'm not going to go to selection. I was like, cool, no problem.
Yeah.
I go, that is the best. Like, I am glad you did that. He goes, I'm glad you made me do that, because now I've owned the decision. So it's great to see them kind of mature and do that stuff. Back to Samantha, she's got a little different story. You can Google Sammy Sullivan. So she did her time as an infantry platoon leader and some staff time. And then she got called up to the USA Women's Rugby Sevens team, and put in the WCAP program because it's an Olympic sport. So she went to the Olympics last summer in Paris and won a bronze medal. So she just plays professional rugby full-time for the Army now. So it's cool to watch that happen. It's a different kind of like way to serve. She gets to bring kind of awareness to like what service can do. But yeah, she's living a different life as a captain. Traveling to Hong Kong and Singapore, playing sevens rugby for America.
There's a lot of different ways to serve. I don't know. It's all advertising for the Army, right? Just get their name out there. That's great to hear. Yeah, that's what I tell people when they ask me, should I go? I'm thinking about going to selection, or I'm thinking about doing this. I go, just fucking do it. Just do it. If you're thinking about it and you don't do it, you're going to regret it way more than trying it later down the road. Right. You can get to selection and go, hey, this isn't for me, right away. And then they'll give you an MRE and let you get out of there. But 8 years from now, 10 years from now, you'll be looking back going, I wish I would have done that. That's going to be miserable. You got to live with that for the rest of your life. So,
Yeah.
well, that's
So I
good
told him,
that
like,
you had to make
kind
the
of along that
decision.
line, just make the decision so you can live with that
Yeah.
for the rest of your life. And it's fine. Even if you regret it later, like, own the decision. Like, just don't be one of those people that was like, I could have, but it was out of my control. I was like, nothing's out of your control. Even as a captain of the United States Army, you still get some choices, man. So,
Last one before we start wrapping things up here. Did you ever get a hard time for not getting your Ranger tab as an officer?
not really.
Okay.
I think because we were like immediately in combat, and as long as you proved yourself on your team that you could do the thing without it, um, I don't. As a field artillery guy, I had that battalion commander that hated Rangers, so like that was no worry. Um, I had an opportunity before I got there. Like that was like my real window, and I decided I don't. I'm going to a mechanized field artillery unit. I don't need to suck at Ranger school. So maybe a little bit of a regret there because I'm positive I would have been all right and made it through. Um, so I didn't have an opportunity as a lieutenant once I got to the unit because he wasn't going to let anyone go back to Ranger school. And then with my timeline and everything that I was so late, there wasn't like time for me to go back. I probably could have tried to go between rotations, those 3 back-to-back rotations when I was a captain in 1st Battalion 3rd Group. But the one opportunity I had, I would have deployed late. And in my head, I was like, I'm not deploying late. It was the second trip, and we knew we were going to a fire base. So I'm not deploying late from this just to get a tab. So I skipped it and kind of never, I never really looked back. It worked out. Kind of became the thing. Like, I'm fine with it. And I didn't go to jumpmaster school until I was a major before I took a company. Um, so that was kind of like my badge of honor: bald wings and a single stack. This is what you get, Sullivan. But my son now gives me a bad time because, of course, infantry officer. He went to Ranger school, made it through. So I'm like, strike 2, dude. You're a West Pointer, and now you're a Ranger. I go, I can't be around you. But it's
Yeah.
all good.
Well, just listen, son. I can find out who the general in your command is and make your life hell. So you better shut the fuck up. All right. I got 5 questions I ask everybody,
Right.
and then we'll get out of here. What is your response to thank you for your service?
Thank you for your support.
Thank you for support. So you got it queued up. You got an answer right away. Some people
Yeah.
I ask and they go, "Oh fuck, I don't know what to say,"
No, I
or
stole
they'll
that
pick the.
from Ivan Castro, Blind Green Beret.
Yeah.
He's a runner. Everybody thanks him for his service. And I heard him say it first. He said, "Thank you for your support." I'm like, I'm stealing that. He goes, everybody should. Yeah.
I say it. It was an honor. That's a. It was an
That's
honor.
good
It
too.
really was.
Yeah.
So I heard that right when I got out of the military, and I stole that too. I was like, "That's perfect. That
Yeah.
stops the conversation." So, all right. What is the one characteristic that sets operators apart from the conventional forces?
Um, I would say their flexibility or their ability to deal with ambiguity. Like they're comfortable in it. Actually, they thrive, So you give them an opportunity to solve a problem and make the solution better than what the book answer is, you've got a successful operator.
That's the name of the game, right? That's the job. We're
Yeah.
going to give you a loose set of requirements, and you got to figure out the rest. What is the one moment of your career that you wish you could go back and relive?
Ooh, that's a good one. Um, Probably that rooftop in Marja, Afghanistan for those 3 days.
With the windows closed this time?
I would close the curtains immediately because that would have been a bad day. It was the twins' birthday, and I was like, I can't die today. They don't want to remember this for the rest of their life. But yeah,
Was
I
that
think that was like
operation?
that operation. I felt like was the antithesis of all the things that I was training to do and getting to do.
That was the pinnacle where it all came together. It was all the training and all of everything. Where
Yeah, I think so. I will say I took a lot of crap from the teams because they're like, fighting B team. You want to be a fighting B team commander. But I sold it because I was like, do you want to be the guy that's on the phone with the SOTF and Siege SOTF? Or do you just want to be able to tell me what's going on and I'll take care of all the rest? They're like, okay, let's see how that works, so yeah.
What is the best piece of advice that you received during your career?
Never go anywhere without an NCO. I had a command sergeant major.
Even as a colonel?
I had a command sergeant major tell me as a major, a special forces major, Sullivan, you make dumb decisions when you don't have an NCO with you. I am ordering you for the rest of your life to have an NCO with you at all times. And it served me well. Like having somebody that you could rely upon that could provide you the breadth of their experience and understanding, had seen probably what you thought you were going through for the first time. Some advice that was invaluable.
All right, last one. What were you afraid of then, and what are you afraid of now?
Man, that's good too. My dog's barking during an interview. No, it's been constant. I would say, I probably, I have a touch of like imposter syndrome. So I think like my fear is like, I'm not doing this as well as I could have, and I'm going to be exposed for it, so it's probably a little bit of fear of failure. But yeah, I think it kind of forces me to work harder than maybe I need to. But I think that would be it. I mean, I'm lucky. I have like an incredible like work life balance, even though my wife would say I work too hard even now in this job than I should. But the support I have, the other decisions I've made, some of it probably by luck and chance, but no, I think that's probably the thing that kind of still is like, I don't want to be exposed is like I didn't put in the effort or I didn't have the capability to fulfill the things I was supposed to be doing. But I try to feed on that and, work hard to make sure that isn't the case. But
the people that are afraid of that are never the ones that are guilty of it. They're always too afraid to let it happen, right? They just won't let, so they're always afraid of it creeping in there. It's like, I want to leave no doubt when I walk away that nobody's going to say I didn't do everything I could to accomplish what I was trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Michael Sullivan, RWB. How can they find you on the socials? And what is the date for your big project coming up of the Run Across America?
Yep. So Team Red, White, and Blue, you can Google it, but it's teamrwb.org is how you can find our organization. And in there, you'll see kind of a what we do tab, and you'll find our events and our things. And then I encourage everybody, take the time, download the app, get in there, and then play with it, see what's going on, and then provide feedback to me, if you think there's a better way for Team RWB to do what we're doing for veterans. I'm on primarily Instagram. It's a great way to like kind of get information out if you're an organization like ours. So I'm like Sully _RWB, pretty easy to remember. I'm usually talking about like, hey, get off the couch and quit feeling sorry for yourself. Join the team. So a lot of reels that basically are me just running and talking into my phone. But my 1,000 followers are really excited about it. Yeah, I'm trending. I think I'm trending. And then for the big event this year, that we talked about is the Old Glory Ultra Relay, and that starts on the 2nd of May, deck of the Midway, 3,000 miles later, and ideally 17 days. We'll be running into the mall at the future home of the GWAT Memorial and celebrating the setting of a world record of relaying a flag by 12 veterans across the United States of America. So that'll be the big event. And like I said, you can get on the app. There's plenty of other things everybody can be involved in. Monthly missions. This month's the Vietnam battle drill to honor those guys that fought in Vietnam. It's a workout this year. And there's those each month. And then in October is our 15th year anniversary where myself and Mike Irwin will run the Twin Cities Marathon with a flag, and he'll hand it to me at the end as the new executive director. So big stuff this year.
Big stuff, big year. And just keep building on it, right? Can't stop. Sully, I appreciate you coming on. That was a great conversation. I'll get these up and links to all your socials in the show description. You got anything for me?
No, I appreciate what you're doing. Like the positive energy behind your podcast and what you're doing for our community, I think is needed. You can still be a quiet professional, but you don't have to be silent. There's too many good stories and good people out there that should be exposed to the greater public. And, I think it's good for our community to have something like this. So I really appreciate what you're doing.
I appreciate that, and I hope I can get to the point where I can get everybody on here and share their story, no matter what level of exposure that they have. That is the base of the show. If you send me a message and you were a head of special operations identifier, you will come on and we will record an episode, no matter what you want to talk about. So,
Love it.
all right. Bye, everybody.